Go ahead.
Oh, you're okay. She has a hard time hearing you, Brent, so we gotta put it close to you.
Right in front of Bryn, yeah.
It's me that's hard to hear?
Please announce.
No, it's hard to understand.
Okay.
You only got to hear my name to kick off a meeting one more time,
Something just.
and then I'm done.
It was working. No, it's not.
Now we broke the owl.
Is it the video that's not working?
No, it was, everything's working. I set it up. I don't know. But when I hit record it, it's not on the owl anymore. See what I mean?
Good. How are you doing?
It was working earlier. Well, the owl's not connected anymore. Hold on. Sorry. It was working earlier.
Thanks, Gabby.
Want me to
A little hard to know what to do when I ain't got my stuff.
cool technology when it works.
Because I was eating and I asked it to stop.
I didn't see there was minutes with this. I'm really failing. Can we approve minutes tonight, or it's just a work session?
Give me a second, it hasn't powered back up yet.
I know, but there's minutes on here. We can't do those, right?
Marta told me we could.
It's been agendized, so I guess if you
What's up?
call it.
We can do
discussion,
minutes?
vote.
Are we going to do minutes?
No, there's minutes on our agenda. We can't approve them tonight, where it's just work session. Or can we?
Oh, yeah, it was noticed just as a work session.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should save it for the next time.
Okay.
Just
Because work sessions, we don't go all through all those other things either.
yeah.
We just go right into,
Normally.
because I didn't see all that on the first agenda either.
Now it's going.
Hello! Hoo! I can't hoot like an owl. Anybody hoot like an owl?
Recording your progress.
I dare you guys to try. Sorry. Hey, that's pretty good.
Sound like a pigeon.
Yeah. The owl. All right, apologize for being a little late, but we'll go ahead and get our work session started for January 7th, 2025. First item on our work session is going to be a discussion regarding a zoning map amendment application and associated development agreement for the Gibson Farms Rezone, a master plan development that will rezone approximately 550 acres located within the boundary by 12th Street, 4700 West, and the Weber River. The proposed rezone is a new proposed zone called the Traditional Neighborhood Zone, which will allow for a variety of uses within the master plan development, guided by a concept plan included single-family residential, mixed residential, and mixed neighborhood commercial. Charlie,
Thanks.
time's yours. Limited time.
My job here is easy, and it's going to be limited. Turn the time over to our applicant. They've got some stuff to show you for this work session, and then we plan on having this again on the work session and next week. So at the end of the week, to kind of work out some little details and hopefully have it on for a public hearing in February. So, turn the time over to
Yeah. So Jeff Beck, engineer manager with Black Pine. Thanks again for your time. Tonight, I think what we're hoping to cover is we're creating the new zone, traditional neighborhood zone, the TNZ. So we'll pull that up and kind of go through. It's very minimal. This is based on the conversation we had last work session that Leon and Charlie suggested we create a new zone. That zone's going to point to the development agreement. So we'll talk about the zone. We had our attorneys put together basically a term sheet of the development agreement with the material points that matter from the planning commission standpoint, and then the actual development agreement will be with the county commission, as I understand it. But there's things that you guys need to be aware of and vote on. And then in that term sheet, it'll reference open space. We want to talk a little bit about open space. We want to talk about the river setback, as we've talked about in the past. knowing that it was going to come to this. We've done some research and just want to present it and get your guys' opinion on what you think. And then that document that we reviewed last time is the design code. We'll probably go over that next week in more detail, but just kind of a outline of what we're hoping to accomplish tonight. Any questions or concerns out of the gate?
Next week will be during a work session as well,
Yeah.
after the regular.
So we'll jump into, Gene will pull up the, this is the zone. I'll just read maybe kind of the areas that I think are most important, and we can skip around. The purpose of the traditional neighborhood zone is to promote a pedestrian-friendly master plan development that blends diverse residential, commercial, civic, and recreational uses. This zone emphasizes fine-grained design with distinct centers and edges, creating vibrant public realms shaped by thoughtful urban planning rather than relying solely on architectural complexity. Development within the zone will incorporate open spaces, recreational components, and well-designed architecturally integrated structures that are appropriately landscaped and harmoniously buffered from surrounding land uses. Inspired by places like historic Ogden, the zone aims to balance local context, functionality, and aesthetic beauty to foster thriving, walkable communities through customized development requirements and input. Applicability, not that important. Land use types, there's an exhibit at the end of this, or sorry, yeah, and the development agreement that'll talk about uses. We'll go through that. Density, so in the TNZ zone, looking for, that's also in the development agreement, we'll talk about that. Open space, this is based on recommendation from Charlie, but basically we came up with this ratio of 10 acres for 333 dwelling units. The math there is, Charlie mentioned 10 acres per 1,000 residents, and he said there's roughly, on average, 3 residents per dwelling. So to make it simple and to sort of codify it, we said 10 acres per 330 units, because it's going to be easier to do units.
Basically, you're just matching what we have from the Parks districts, right?
In the general plan.
In the general.
Yeah, and for the Parks districts. Yeah.
Okay.
So we do have a question on what is considered open space. In our plan, we have the river setback, we have the slough, we have a lot of public kind of plazas and civic centers. Is there a clear definition of what open space is?
What can be considered open space?
As long as it's not weeds.
Do we have anything on that, Charlie?
What's that?
What's the definition of open space, or basically our ozone?
So,
Take one, Pascal.
well, yeah, if we're looking at the ozones, then it's just, I mean, you could have an golf course, you can have a farm, I mean, there's a whole host of things if we're looking at the ozones. One of the things that the general plan focuses on is publicly accessible open spaces. And so the 10 acres to 1,000, the idea behind that was hopefully to stimulate a variety of developments that have a variety of different types of open spaces that are generally publicly accessible. One of the things that I talked about in our last meeting with both the park districts is about what if it's not a publicly owned park, privately owned park, but it's open for public use. Can that count? And they seem to be generally okay with that as long as it is open for public use. What about a private park only open for that development? And that's kind of where I felt like they kind of drew a line on that and said, that really doesn't benefit anybody but just the developer and the development. So that's kind of where their perspective was. But we haven't had any conversations about plazas. We haven't had any conversations about those gathering spaces. So all of that's kind of still on the table on whether or not that's open space.
Do we have a minimum set anywhere, like a minimum amount of, it's got to be a minimum of 2 acres to be considered a usable open space?
No, we don't, but we have been working with the Park District on things that are donated to them being not less than 5 acres as much as possible.
From a maintenance
What's that?
From a maintenance standpoint, or
Maintenance, yeah. They don't want to be dealing with 1 acre pockets or half-acre pockets all over the place.
so one of the things for this development, the small neighborhood pocket parks are really important. One of the things, and we'll talk about it as we get into the river corridor and that trail system, is for us it's really important to concentrate community energy and not make it so big that it disperses the energy. So frequent pocket parks, plazas, things like that will, in smaller nature, will concentrate community engagement because it concentrates people.
So I have one question. I'm going to pull you in, Lance, and maybe you can answer the question here. We'll do it quick. So the question is, in a development this size that's contiguous, so it's 550 acres, but it's all together, is the Parks District interested in taking these smaller pocket parks on with the larger parks, where the maintenance fees might not be so much, where it's in a fairly small area, or not? Is that something you guys are willing to do?
We've had some discussions as a board along that line, and Kathy, correct me if I speak out of turn here, but generally speaking, when we get down to a couple of acres for a park, or even smaller than that, and I totally understand where Jeff's coming at. I've seen these kinds of parks, San Francisco, Philadelphia, where my daughter has lived over the last 8 years, and they're really important for the neighborhood. Is that okay? But when it comes to the larger community, especially with Charlie's used the term Emerald Necklace there with the River Parkway, that's regional. That's bigger than Taylor West Weaver. So we're just concerned about taking on the cost of these small little 1 acre, 2 acre. We can get down to 4 acres if it's in an area that really needs a park. I think you'll see coming up in Navy Meadows where they've got about a 4 or 5 acre park, and then about maybe it's a 50-foot walkway to another 2 acres. And it's right there, contiguous, it's okay. But then when we start looking at some of those other pathways, do we really want to have to nickel and dime ourselves to death with little pathways? So we're cautious about that, Andrew. We're always open to what you guys feel is a good need and a good development for the community. We're always willing to sit down and kick ideas around and be flexible. But we're really a little nervous when it comes down to small little pocket parks, like I call them landscaping along the road kind of thing. And they're important for the neighborhood, but it's just too much. If we have 20 of those over there, we have to take care of it. It'll probably make one dime to do that.
Well, and I think for us too,
Thank you, Lynn.
There's this balance between our level of maintenance that we want to ensure happens, versus turning it over to the Parks District, who have tons of parks they're maintaining.
So you're looking at kind of a hybrid here between the parks.
Yeah, that's how we see it. And I one of the, as we talked about open space, maybe it makes sense, things that are not developed obviously outside the right of ways, but trails, anything that doesn't have buildings on it that serve as community gathering spaces, even civic centers we feel like could qualify for open space, schools and stuff like that. So I don't as we try to calculate this 10 acres per so many units, we're just trying to make sure we can fit what we need to fit in.
Let me ask you guys this: is that piece? So these houses face the lawn. Is that open space?
No.
That should be counted. No. Okay. Let me drop a guy in.
My opinion's no.
Okay. Hang on.
That's their front yard, their backyard that they're lacking.
Does that change your mind at all?
Nope.
Okay. What about? So that's really valuable information. What about?
Because the people that are going to use that are the ones that live right
Well,
there. That's
go
what
back to your street view, Charlie. Let's talk about that for a second. Just exactly, where do you park? What is there besides, in my opinion, that's a waste of grass and a waste of usable turf. It's not big enough. You could maybe almost play soccer on it or something like that, but I mean, living in this desert, what good does that big old chunk of grass just do sitting there? I mean, what's the benefit of it?
I think it has a benefit personally, like for those houses right there. They can have their little get-togethers together as neighbors or whatever, you know.
I think it makes the whole road feel more.
Families can
Yeah.
put their name on a list
Well,
and
and-
get it for events and
Right,
stuff
yeah.
like
The
that.
reality of is that's used by everyone that lives close by, as
Yeah.
well as people that are walking by
Right.
and want to have an open space. It's not just a front yard. And if you go to these places where they have, I mean that's that way by design, and it's used a lot. It's soccer practices. It's right. It's smaller. It's not some big regional, but it creates an intimacy and they talk about outdoor spaces like outdoor living rooms where you have very distinct kind of walls and it feels comfortable to be in that area. It's not too big. So from a pedestrian oriented standpoint, those
I say that's an open space, basically, and it's not big enough to ever turn over to lands.
Right.
But it's still open, it gives you a better feel in the neighborhood.
Should it be considered public open space? I mean, it's publicly accessible, so it
You know,
shouldn't be
that's
hard
kind
to
of what they
attend.
have to write in their
Yes.
covenants.
So one of the things that you'll see on our next agenda item is we're looking at standardizing our routine development agreements. This project is not routine, but you guys have seen enough subdivisions over the last 2 years that you know what's routine. And one of the things I'm hoping to pitch to you guys is a section we're titling Public Park Open Space. Both there's a dedication provision in that development agreement, and there's a improvements provision in that development agreement. And one of the things that it says is if it's a property, it's an open space property that is open for use by the public during daylight hours, you know, sun up to sundown or 9 o'clock or whatever time we choose, then that can count towards the 10 acres per thousand. If it's not, it doesn't mean that it's not valuable. It just means that it's not counting towards the 10 acres per 1,000. It's not part of the public park.
That's kind of what I was looking for before.
So is this, if we use kind of that
If it's
dynamic,
open.
is this public park open space?
Right.
Charlie, I'm sorry, will you restate what you said the rules with it were?
That's going to be open to the public during normal daylight hours, right? The HOA, if it's privately owned, obviously can close it at nighttime. You don't want to have a lot of stuff going on, but at least open for anyone who passes by, not just these people who live here, but the public.
Public coming from outside of the development as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
Public in general.
Yeah, and that's really important distinction because as we looked at this, one of the things that we heard from the community is, well, first off, we don't want anything to develop, is what we heard. And then we heard, but if it does develop, we need to make sure that we do so in a thoughtful way where the people who live here have something that offsets the burden of all this new development that's coming in to our neighborhoods. And so the idea behind that is the community should get benefits out of developments, not just the developer and the community that will be there in the future.
So, right around this specific open space, about how many homes would there be? Just guess.
This one here?
Yeah.
I'm just going to do a quick look. I'm going to say you got 12.
12? Okay, that's what I was thinking. And how many square feet approximately is that area, open area?
I guess that one.
Probably an acre or better.
Let's see.
About 200 by 200 maybe?
And we don't have to be perfect. We just want to get an idea. Because I'm going on a thought here.
Okay, so we got, let's say that's 100 by, you got maybe 100 by 200.
Yeah. So,
Half acre.
half acre.
yeah. Okay. So here's where I'm going with this. That's not a real big area, half acre. You got 12 homes, but really now that I'm looking at that view, let's say you got 24 homes. And you got people that walk by. You're going to have people, unless the weather's bad, in that park pretty much all the time. So, that live right there. So here's the question, and I know I'm just being rhetorical, but the question is now, does that count toward the 10-acre park? Now I'm kind of seeing it the way Bren does. I don't know that can because it's really not big enough for a large amount of people on a good day. And when you're talking, when I say that, I mean you're going to have people out everywhere. So you're going to have a 10-acre park that has a lot of people using it, and you're going to have small parks like this with a lot of people using it. So maybe there's a formula that can be used to use this toward the 10 acres.
Maybe it counts
But But unless you put one of these for every 24 homes or something along those lines, you're not going to get there.
Well, but I would say, like, the onus is on us to come up with the overall acres, right?
True.
And if you look at, like, there's little pocket parks like that
Everywhere.
all around, and that's the point. Is you want walks to be interesting. Like, the public from outside the community can come in through the trail system, and then they can explore this whole place and see different pocket parks. And if you go, again, it's hard to describe, but people that use that are people that are around and people that are coming in.
Mm-hmm.
They're meeting their friends. It is a public park. It's not.
Right.
It's not a private park.
Maybe it's hard for me to visualize it since not living in an area like this, but I feel like if I'm going through that area, I don't think that it's not necessary. I think it's definitely necessary.
Mhm.
But I think the majority of the use is going to be from those houses right there. If I'm going through that area, oh, this is awesome, but I'm not going to have a picnic because I feel like I'm right on that person's doorstep.
Sure.
I'm not going to load my kids up and go drive over there to go do something here. You're going to go to the park that has your pavilion and all your stuff.
But I
You
like-
hit it on the head.
I
It's
like
their
what
front
Commissioner
yard.
Favero said, where we're given it like maybe an equation, not a full credit, if you want to say it that way, but an equation or a partial credit for open space, because even though maybe the general public isn't using it at the masses, but those that are right there are going to be using it, which keeps them out of the bigger one. Yeah.
That's kind of where my thought was going. So now I'm going to ask the question: are we getting off script, going into this kind of detail?
A little bit. Well, I mean, this is an important discussion, and you know, for us, open space like that would. I mean, we have to provide almost 100 acres of open space, right? And half-acre parks aren't getting us there.
Right.
But they should count. It's public. It's the public realm. Anyone can go in and use it. I just don't see why you would nickel and dime a small park, you know, from a half acre to a quarter acre, when we're providing so much open space anyway, and having lots of those actually enhances both the internal and external community. So anyway,
That may be true. Maybe we need to look at the big picture once it's all.
Yeah, like if you were to say, is that
Well, and that's why I want to go back. Maybe we need to go through all of this stuff first, then come back to that once we have an understanding.
All right.
of what
Yeah, and
this
we
is.
have a bigger open space thing that I think will help get that. Okay, you want to go back to the?
Yeah, you want to stop sharing?
Okay.
Off on height, but we can keep.
Height. I mean, we put some standards in this, but they're really the crux of this is in the
Where'd those-
design code.
Pass the rest of those around if you wouldn't mind, Wayne.
Which is?
Take one of those papers and would you pass the rest of them over to us? Thank you.
So height.
Even with glasses, I can't read that far.
Buildings go up a little bit. Buildings within the TNZ are limited to 4 stories. A story is inhabitable level within the building. Just to be clear, this isn't everywhere in the design code. Most of it is not 4 stories. 4 stories would be the height limit around the Main Street corridor. Everything else would be less than that. Basements, which are interior part of the building, below the ground of every story. We're not going to have many basements because of the water.
Yeah, please don't.
Yeah, we're not going to.
Do you have any desire to do basement and backflow around it? Is that allowed?
I think we would do basements on the upper ground, but not on the lower ground. Rezone development agreement. So this is we're rezoning it to this zone, and then it kicks over to the development agreement. None of it. This is just legal jargon. So basically, that is the zone. It's has a couple of codes, and then it kicks everything to the development agreement.
A few guiding principles, and the development agreement does the rest. Which I kind of like this way of doing it better than using the MPDOZ. That's still on the table. We still can ask them to do that, but it's just, I can't remember how many pages the MPDOZ is, but there's a lot of detail in there that frankly only creates certain types of developments, and this is not one of them.
Well, the devil's in the agreement here. in the
Yep.
development agreement.
So we're going to go to the term sheet now. This is the high level stuff that, when we talked to Charlie about, do we have the whole development agreement? Do we come up with the stuff that actually pertains to the planning commission? This is what we did. So this is the term sheet, the agreements, master development agreement, property is in Exhibit A, you'll see that. Zoning is the TNZ zone. The term, so the initial term of the MDA will be 30 years. Charlie, you had a comment on this. The PCC is 30 years with a 5-year renewal unless we get a notice that it's not renewed.
And one question on that, and we discussed this in the previous work session, but if this area incorporates, this goes directly over without being manipulated in any way, shape, or form, this agreement, into a different municipality.
The new city can work with the developer and make whatever changes they want to, but that's up to them. So yeah, that could happen, but if the new city wants to do whatever they want to do and the developer doesn't want to do it, then whatever's in the agreement stands.
Okay.
Now, that because we are creating a new zone, anything that is written in that zone will be vested. We'll talk a little bit more about vesting when we get to the next item. But everything else that's in the land use code would not necessarily be vested. So if we open up the subdivision code and say, if you're going to subdivide land, you got to provide your first form kit. They're not vested in whatever the previous subdivision code was. They're only vested in what their development agreement says they're vested in. The county can still change the other land use development regulations. That's why when JDC went through the process, they said, we don't want a new city to be able to change things around on us, so we're going to take all 500 pages of the current county code and we're going to tack it onto the back of that development agreement so that we can say it can change, for better or worse.
Anything's negotiable, but at least that's there and it stands. Yeah.
Vesting, so if it gets adopted, it vests. Keep going. Uses are an exhibit at the end. We'll go through that. Maximum residential density, the MDA and development within the design code, which you guys received last work session and we'll go over next week, has a maximum number of residential dwelling units at 6 per acre. And again, if you look at the general plan and the concept plan that we have, a lot of that density is concentrated in the Main Street core, and then it becomes less dense as it goes up. Development of property, Black Pine developed property, consistent with this development agreement in the zone. Full power and exclusive control over the property.
That's 3,300 units, right?
And then I think we added, Charlie, that this will have the phasing will have a logical, based on infrastructure. We can't just develop all over the place. We wouldn't want to do that anyway, but there's a logical kind of path based on the infrastructure.
So one of the things that they're asking for in their development agreement, which is not non-routine for some developers to ask for, is that they're not required to do the development. If something happens in the future and they can't, especially if we're expecting it to be just them and not them not being able to sell it, piece it out, or just sell it in whole, and something happens, they're allowed to do the development, but they're not required to. If they stop at some point in time, they get partway through, decide the rest of it just doesn't make sense to them, we've kind of worked out a default to that. Some development agreements don't say that at all. Some development agreements say, this is what you're going to give us, or you're going to be in default, and the zone gets reverted back to whatever it was. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there. But the benefit of this is where we're not telling the developer that you have to go phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, every 5 years or every 3 years or whatever it is. The developer can be responsive to the market, but with one caveat, that If you're creating a street, the street has to make a connection. You know, you're not creating single access dead end roads that then could stop and the rest of your development stalls and we're stuck with a dead end for a while. So that kind of stuff. Logical progression of streets, logical progression of utilities, logical progression of open space. Proportionate platting of open space per density unit, proportionate trail creation of open space per dwelling unit. So just to make sure as the development comes and is phased in, at least when it's there, gets its fair share of all those other amenities and good quality planning principles.
But like the other parts of our code would still come into play, like the 30 units on a single axis and stuff like that. Still,
That'll still apply unless the development agreement says that doesn't apply. Yep. Now, keep in mind, we'll talk about this on the next item. It's just legislature likes to adopt rules that invalidate parts of our codes, and so we're not entitled to everything that's in our code. Laws change. But so sometimes it's good to capture, if it's something you think needs to happen, it's good to capture that kind of stuff in the development agreement, because then development agreements are all about investing in a developer in something, giving them predictability, giving them the ability to get lending and all that stuff. But when it comes to the jurisdiction, most of the time, a lot of development agreements, there's no vesting for the county. In fact, if you look at the way a lot of development agreements are written, it's the developer gets to stick with the laws that are adopted right now, unless the county adopts laws that the developer likes better, then the developer can do that, but the county can't require the so that kind of stuff. We can have some reciprocal vesting, even though technically it's not vesting for the county. We can have some reciprocal vesting if we feel like it's really important. Again, we'll talk a little bit more on the next item, but that next item I think will help enlighten us a little bit on some of the unique situations of this development agreement.
So the town architect, next section, we talked about this a little bit last work session, that this is going to be governed by the town architect, who will kind of make sure that everything is in compliance with the design code, which is an exhibit to the development agreement. Again, we'll go through that next week. But basically, the town architect is the initial one's Mike Watkins, and there's things that they can approve and things that we have to come back to the county to get changed if we want to change. But those are things that you would agree on in the design code.
Charlie, remind me, so the development agreement, that's done with planning and doesn't come through us, right?
With the planning division and county commission. That's how we've routinely and historically done it. I've had a portion of state law pointed out to me that one attorney said they want their client to go through the planning commission with the development agreement, and that was the JDC. So you guys saw that development agreement. We've got another attorney in the Ogden Valley saying the same thing. They want their client to go through that because they don't want anyone to be able to challenge. There's one little provision in state law that just makes it seem like every facet of the development agreement has to go through the planning commission. Even though I think, Liam, I don't know if you've talked with Cortland about this, but I think we have this general understanding that it's the land use regulations that go in a development agreement that has to go to the planning commission.
Correct.
Administrative items in that development agreement, how, I always like to go back to force majeure just because I like to say the word and don't know what it means. Stuff like that, that isn't land use regulation, so that's not something for the planning commission to work through.
Personally, I mean, I agree with what JDC did. Having developments that large and like this, I feel like we should be as transparent as possible and let everybody see that stuff up front.
Well, and that...
Especially when we have something as vague as we did before that was shown to right here. This is pretty vague.
Yep.
So to say, oh, it's all going to be in the development agreement, and then nobody see it here.
Yeah,
including the public,
we're happy to share the development
Yeah.
agreement. I think part of it is just the concern of, getting stuck on points that don't pertain to the planning commission from land. We have nothing to hide. We can be transparent.
Yeah.
We'll send that
and
over.
You may get stuck in some of those points, but in my opinion, that's kind of the nature of the beast when you have this big of a
Sure.
project.
All right.
And this term
Hey,
sheet is based off of that development.
I was going to say that's totally fine. If you guys want to see the development agreement, we'll give you the development agreement. And if any of you review it and have questions, you can call me or email me before a work session or before a meeting and ask me questions about it, and I can help you with it.
Okay. Yeah.
And
I think that's a good idea, and not just for me, but I mean, I think when we see these other things, the proposals coming through, the public is fully aware of what's going on, and this is something that is on high radar for our neighbors. So
Yeah.
I think that should be privy to a lot of people.
Now, just to make sure we're clear, the development agreement, all that still has to go through a public hearing. It still has to be noticed to the county commissioners, still have to look at it. So it still should have the same amount of public attention. It just doesn't have that extra meeting with the planning commission. However, I don't think it hurts too much.
I think it would look good on their part.
Yeah,
as
we
well.
we have no problem sending it. I
I think
think
it'd be helpful for you to, one more chance for people to come and
yeah,
voice.
we have no problem with
See.
that. There's nothing in there that's. I mean, this is the stuff that matters. So anything else is, if you want to read it, if they want to read it, they can. There's
And
nothing-
Liam and I, we can kind of help you guys navigate what is a land use regulation and what is not. Even some things in our land use regulation book aren't technically land use regulations. They're administrative provisions, like how the planning commission conducts itself is not a land use regulation. That's an administrative issue.
Well, I'd like to see that either in a work session, if not in a meeting. I'd like to see it with the whole group.
We'll,
Have an eyes
we'll,
on it.
we'll bring the term sheet and the development agreement next work session, just so you can see where what's missing from the term sheet.
Because there's always something to be learned from this stuff.
Yeah.
Whether it applies to planning commission or not
Yeah.
directly.
I just say again, we are happy to be transparent. We just, based on conversations we've had, we felt like the term sheet is what the planning commission would need.
No, and I appreciate that, but I agree. The meat and potatoes of it is that whole document,
Yeah.
and if that's because that was my big thing when I
If
seen
that's
this.
what this
Traditional
points to,
comes to, this new zone, but everything, just like you said, this zone is essentially that development agreement.
And Jeff, hopefully I didn't make it sound like I was implying.
No. I
just want to make sure.
Yeah, and
They're hiding all this stuff.
we know, and I think a lot of the development agreements can be legalese. You have this, and then a lot of really the stuff that I think matters is going to be in that design code, because that's what is going to govern the community basically in terms of design. So.
What you guys normally see from me in a staff report for the planning commission, if you're not looking at the development agreement, is a whole list of things that are important from a land use regulation perspective that I'm recommending you guys recommend approval of to the county commission. What we do is we take that information and we plop it right into the middle of the development agreement that says design standards, land uses that are allowed, development standards is there. And then all the whereases and the now therefores and the term and all that stuff, that's negotiated by the county commission, and all the general stuff at the bottom that's still negotiated by the county commission and the attorney. So that's
We'll send it.
we don't want to waste your time, but at the same time, this one's probably important.
Okay. So design code, that's again that document we went over last work session. We'll go over it again next because that's part of the development group. Open space. So again, same thing. 10 acres for every 330 dwelling units. Roads. It's going to be consistent with the roadway master plan. We did some of that work in the general plan, and then Charlie, anything else on the roads?
The only other thing on roads is the design code will give the town architect the ability to kind of make some tweaks, but generally speaking, we'll be looking for a generalized layout for that for the build out of that development. For example, one of the things that Mr. Watkins mentioned when we were over in Louisville looking at Norton Commons was they had enough flexibility where there was a certain lot size here and a certain lot size here. There's quite a bit of space in between that really just didn't make a lot of sense, and it wasn't necessary to meet their open space threshold. It just made more sense to cut a road through, and that road wasn't shown on their concept plan. So the development agreement, the concept plan, the design regulations will all be written in a way that gives the town architect a little bit of latitude to do that. Probably in a way that you can go ahead and do more, but maybe not less kind of fashion. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is what happens if the developer decides to stop and not finish the development, if the development goes into default, if termination or expiration occurs. I think what we need to do in that case is, what I would recommend, I don't know if I talked to you guys about this, but I think you guys are okay with it, is we go with the form-based zone, and we have a street regulating plan, very similar to what we had for 4700 West and 12th Street. We have a street regulating plan that's pre-designed by them that says, if we can't make this happen, if we go to default, we'll do it this way. And the reason I'm recommending that instead of going back to the A1 zone is because, well, frankly, I don't remember, I was telling somebody yesterday, oh, it was Liam, said, if I went to default and the rest of my property had to go back to the A1 zone, and I really wanted the rest of that property to be upzoned without a development agreement, I'm going to pack a pile of agricultural waste and manure right next to the neighborhood, right? And they just wouldn't go well.
But not even from that perspective. But from the perspective of what we want that community to be 50 years from now.
Right.
I don't want them, if they're going to default, I want them to default on the first building.
Yeah.
If we're going to go back to the A1 zone and then go back to third acre lots. I don't want it to get a third of the way done or a half of the way done or 3/4 of the way done. And then we blow it apart and we go back to the A zone. And then we go from one extreme to the other. We've got these houses on at least probably minimum third acre lots.
Yeah.
And then we come into this proposed development being what it is. And there's not a seamless way to match those together.
Yeah.
And that bothers me more than from a landowner perspective of wanting my property upgraded with higher density.
Yeah.
So
one of the things the form-based zone currently still says is to get the density, you get the base of whatever that prior zone was, so it'd be the A1 in this case.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just pretend for a second, 10 years in, we get some really cool development out of this, but for whatever reason, the rest of it's not penciling. The zone would go to the form-based zone. The form-based zone says whatever the prior zone was, the A1 zone, that density stays with the land. And then the developer can develop in accordance with whatever the street regulating plan says. They just need to bring in those rights from other areas. So then the transferable development rights would come into play at that point. And we don't have to do that. We can say that you don't need to transfer anything if we want to. The question is if we're upzoning, and because we're getting a benefit out of it, do you still want to see an upzone if you don't get this benefit out of it? And for me, I think I'm okay with that. Yeah, because I think the form-based zone.
as long as it doesn't exceed the proposed units per acre
Yes.
of the existing, what
Okay.
difference does it make?
Actually, perfect.
So when I talked to Craig Jensen, the attorney that's drafting this, he didn't think it was, because we're okay with this, but he said, I don't think it's legal to have some default, like, he thinks it has to go back through. If we default, basically it comes back here and you guys say this is what we want it to be.
He must have been in the same training session.
So I don't know, Liam, it's probably worth getting on a call with Craig and just hashing out what he thinks is legal and what you know, based on what Charlie's saying. We're okay with either. When we pushed him on saying, well, can you add that to this term sheet? He's like, I actually don't think that's legal.
We'll show him how we think that we can make it legal.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll chat.
Well, and there's another way we could do this if there's concern about legalities. We could rezone the property to the form-based zone with traditional and neighborhood zone overlay. And then what happens if you default is the TNZ zone defaults, and you're just left with the form-based zone. Same thing, and that's why I think I understand his perspective. The former property rights ombudsman, Brent Bateman, he and I had a good debate a few months ago about the same thing. I said, if you could do the exact same thing with overlay zones, then why can't you just do this?
Okay.
We hashed this out internally just the other day and today.
It's in this document. That
Okay. All right. We can move on.
Before we move on,
Oh.
sorry, Geneva, will you scroll back up to the open space section right quick? Let's see what it says. Okay, never mind, that's already in there. I was looking for that word minimum open space and ratio.
Yeah.
Because there might be some areas where like, we can probably do a little bit more, so
Yep.
that's good.
Yeah.
You can even change that to 1 per 33 instead of 10 per 333, so it doesn't look like you have to have at least.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's better. That's better.
So on the roads, explain to me, so they'll have to match what's in the general plan. That statement there, the county shall not require Black Pine to oversize any roadways without providing. They've got to build what the general plan says, right? If we're saying it's got to be an 80-foot right-of-way corridor, not a 60, they've got to build that without.
That's up to you guys. So if they want to go with their own cross sections, which I understand you do, then they can get those in a development agreement vested. I mean, we have full control over whether or not we say you can do that. I mean, if we want to have them do the wide rights of way, we can. So it's really going to be up to you guys.
So the next work session, we'll go through those sections in detail about, the main corridors going through. And Gary's not going to like what our suggestions are, but we feel like...
Oh, no, they got trees.
Yeah, there's a lot of trees.
Standing ovation.
For Gary or for us?
For trees.
Okay. But to really create the type of environment, we feel like they need to not be super wide right-of-ways. Obviously, the pedestrian experience is really important. Traffic calming is really important. But the major corridors, arterial, they need to move cars. We get that. And we understand there's concerns about, these one-way parallel parking. We can agree on that. But I think generally the type of development is not to promote cars screaming through this place.
So one of the things that we're working on with Flagship is that, and we just changed the ordinance to allow it to happen, that they can do private streets. And if they do private streets, they could build it to the standard that they're hoping to get adopted in the development agreement. So basically we're saying any street that the county will have ownership and operation responsibility for will be built to the standards that we've already agreed to. But if the developer wants to put in private streets, they can. But if those private streets are intended to count towards their minimum connectivity requirement, then they got to be open for public use. So then you've got an HOA that's owning, operating, maintaining,
Paying to maintain, plowing.
Right.
We just hope you guys like those sections. So we'll go through that.
I don't want to get in the weeds on the roads, but there's one road that I'm concerned about that we mentioned previously, I don't know when, and that's the 300 or 400 north, coming across the river.
Mm-hmm.
And where it will come through or into or not even maybe go around this development. That's the one I'm concerned about. That one's got to be a major road, just like 1150 is.
We've got 1150, we've got 400 south, and then we have 700 north.
Does it go clear to 700?
Yeah, so 700 is the northernmost one, and then 400 runs right through the middle, and then 12th is obviously at the bottom. So yeah, I think those need to be the 80-foot rights of way at least.
The 700 one, I believe, is the one that in the general plan, doesn't it? It's future or drawn to go all the way across into Merritt Slaterville.
Mm-hmm.
700 is the one that'll cross the river
no.
twice.
400 is on the general plan. 400 south goes all the way into Marriott Slaterville, connects into 200 south of Marriott Slaterville, which that 200 connects into
Up to 1900.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
700 north, the general plan doesn't show it crossing the river, but we've already worked out a deal with Heritage on the farms to stub it, not stub the streets, stub the right-of-way right to the river, so that if Marriott Slaterville ever determines that they're okay with a little bit of floodplain development, that's their big concern about having roads there, then they can build a bridge and connect. And then you'll have 700, which will go to Pioneer, which will go to 400 north interchange all the way out to potential interchange on 700 north, interchange to potential interchange on 400 12th Street. So
Okay.
get you your east-west connections.
Okay. Keep going. Obviously, we need water and sewer, stormwater. We can utilize public infrastructure districts to construct some infrastructure.
Great.
So
Our PIDs out here.
our economic development said those aren't going to go in. We can't have clauses like this in a development agreement anymore.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to having them in as long as they don't say the county shall create a district, but Stephanie said, no, take them out of the development agreements, those go through a separate process.
So if we want it, we apply for it
Yeah.
outside of this.
Yeah, you go through the other process, which there is no entitlement to a PID.
Sure, got it. Okay. Development application. Hold on.
I'm sorry.
I don't think that's. Oh, yeah. We still have to get it. We still have to apply through the county for certain things. Disputes, default. In the event of default by the party, and such default is not cured by the defaulting party within 30 days of written notice, the non-defaulting party shall have the right to cure such default or enjoin such violation and otherwise enforce the requirements contained in the MDA. So when we go through the development agreement, we'll talk through the whole the default section. That's probably good that we go through that.
So are they going to, as this develops, because they're not going to develop in traditional phases, right?
What do you think a traditional phase is?
Well, I'm tying it back to like securities and stuff like that. So if they're not, are they going to come in and say, okay, this area is developing? That's when Gary puts together a number and says, this is the cost. They've still got a bond and all that for it, right?
Yeah, so phasing can happen after preliminary plat has been approved, essentially. And your preliminary plat can say, this is how the phases work. I don't like to put those on preliminary plats because that just is too rigid. Let the developer phase whatever's in that preliminary plat. So let's say the preliminary plat has 500 lots, right?
Mm-hmm.
They come in, they do 25 at a time. They can do that because the prelim is what essentially vests them in what those ordinances are and is the step that requires them to submit all of their hard costs, their infrastructure design. They've got to have all their engineering stuff. And so one of the things, actually, you'll see that on the next item. Maybe we should have started with that one first.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we would say is that they've got to have a stamp by Gary and his team prior to getting final plat approval of any individual phase. And they could do preliminary of the first 500, and then they could build that out and then do preliminary of the next 500, so you can phase the phasing.
I just want to, just as long as we're going a little off traditional, that
No,
the
we
securities
can't.
are still in place for, I mean, there's a lot on this default thing, but, I'd hate to see a default halfway through a phase to where,
you're taking,
things have got to come in,
to fix.
finish roads and stuff like that.
I think default is a really important part of a development agreement from a non-land use perspective. That it would be good for you guys to see some of that. When it comes to those securities, legislature keeps eroding away what we can and cannot bond for. We can't bond for example, public landscaping. Landscaping that's in a park strip. I'm not going to say trees. Landscaping that's in a park strip that is not maintained by the county or by the jurisdiction is not public landscaping. And under state statute, we cannot require a bond for that. So we can't require a bond for street trees, for example, or, sorry, I said trees.
Thank God.
All we need is Tyler here.
Yeah.
Trees.
But if that's something that is very important, if we see things that are really important that we know we can't do through state statute or through our own ordinances, we can get that in a development agreement. I think my goal would be, if you guys are comfortable with it, to have this development agreement really kind of set up those overarching principles, and then hopefully set it up so that the town architect and the town council, whatever it is that's running that entity, can make most of their decisions on their own, and then we just kind of have a big stick in the background wielding over their head saying, better do it right, that sort of thing, so that we don't have a big burden on us. I don't know why I just said all that. Did I answer a question? Or did
Yeah, we're good. In a roundabout way, Charlie. They said we're covered.
The last section here is assignment and transfer. Basically, what we're saying is we can assign and transfer it to a related party. If we assign or transfer to an unrelated party, the county has to approve that. So we have, this is something we talked about.
What defines a related or unrelated?
Yeah.
Usually that
Well-
gets defined in the development agreement.
Yeah, and IRS standards as well.
Yeah.
You'll see that in our next item.
So if this.
Gosh, Charlie.
I was going to say, it's not as easy as just saying that,
Uncle Tom.
yeah, anybody's related.
Hardship.
Would I be a related party?
No. Sorry, Brad.
Dang it. Just kidding. I wouldn't want the headache.
I mean, really, the reason related is if we transfer to another entity that is not this that we own, for whatever reason.
But through the transfer, they still have to adhere to everything that's.
Yes, and I think that the reason we put in, it's the fact that if we want to give it to someone else that's not us, you guys have to approve that. Is a huge kind of governing thing for the county, I think, in terms of making sure that this happens. That's not the intent. We intend to do this, but
Black Pine Development Group, are you guys LLC or incorporated LLC? I mean, LLCs are generally set up for different developments. A developer will just set them up individually. You know, it's this development LLC, that development LLC. That way, if any one of them goes belly up, the master developer's incorporation.
Yeah, this is not going to be in Black Pine's name, right? And so, from a liability standpoint, but we'll have an entity that Black Pine owns that will take this. So that's the point of the related. Anyway.
Well, that's if you're still empowered to be able to assign it to another entity. What happens in a case? Now we're going to back up. What happens to it in case of a default, and they don't have control over it anymore?
Well, then that goes by the termination provision.
And this provision has nothing to do with it. This
Right.
assignment transfer.
Right.
Okay.
And default doesn't automatically cause them to lose control. Default is a mechanism for us to say, we're starting potential legal proceedings against you. They still own the property, they still have property rights vested in it.
Right.
It's just, we could say, sorry, we're not going to give another building permit until you fix this problem.
Depends on which chapter.
That's right, that's right.
Any other questions here?
And the rest goes into our.
Okay.
And then land uses.
Do you guys want to go through the land use table right now? We can send this out unless you want to.
Charlie, could you put this in a comparison, or could they put this in a comparison to what our current table says?
What do you want to compare it to?
I want to see what they're proposing here and what our current
Form base?
tables show.
Yeah, do you want to see it with form-based? Every zone has its own table, well, generally. Do you want me to compare it to our standard?
Well, in our sheets, when we played the days of the rows, you know, days and days of rows, it said
Oh yeah, different zones.
the different zones, and as it went down, so we seen what Arthur, you know what I mean? Something like that, so we can see a comparison of what it, as you come across the line, well, recreational resort, in this zone it says this, in this zone it's this, in this zone. So it just, in my opinion, I want to see how it relates.
Do you want to see all the zones? Because that's a big exercise. But I can do residential and.
Well, we don't. We know this isn't an A zone anymore. You know, so yeah, maybe what our R115 zone says, and maybe what our R3 zone says, and maybe what form base says.
Okay.
Because that's what this development ties into, right?
I agree. Okay, that's easy.
And if you just scroll through this, it's pretty generic.
Because I'm assuming your definitions in all these are the same as what our code says now, right?
Well, it will be. So the development agreement will have a definition section.
No, I mean here. So like a bar or any other, is that the same as what our current code says a bar?
Not necessarily. But we could take the opportunity to, if you like it better the way that it's worded, to make some adjustments. The zone, the document, the one-page document, is a text amendment. We can get in and make adjustments to other chapters if we want to.
And we originally had the uses in the zone, and we can put that back in the zone. And we can revert it to language that's in the county right now in terms of the definition.
Well, only reason I asked the question is for a comparison.
Yeah, what's the difference between this and what you guys are comfortable
Did
with?
Westbridge did they do one of these charts?
No, they said we're okay with the uses you have in your zones.
Right.
So we didn't need to see it because they weren't changing the uses, just the development standards.
And what are they the form base?
No. Well, they'll have an element of form base on it, but most of it's going to be.
So when you say they use the uses in your.
Just the R1, R2, and R3 zones, the ones that we currently have, they didn't change any of the uses.
Okay.
But you guys are going to want to have some extra because you're going to have some mixed-use commercial. So.
Yeah, I just want to see a comparison.
I agree. I say use the terminology that we have so we know what we're comparing to instead of new terminology.
And if you want to propose something different, put it in there in red or something. Because I don't disagree Charlie's point. Maybe they're proposing something that would fit us all around better. And while we're doing this text amendment, we could update that as well.
For example, I mentioned these guys earlier today that the way they're defining story works, I think, a lot better than the way we did it in our most recent update. And so, those little tweaks are going to be good for us.
Yeah, but we're one-trick ponies. We learn it one way. It's stuck.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to we're not trying to complicate it either. We're happy to revert it back to that.
No, I don't disagree that there might be some areas in what you're proposing because it's going to be a little bit different, some of those areas. But it'd be nice to see.
It'd be easier for us because if we see it, we're like, oh, that doesn't seem like that makes sense. Instead of being like, hey, you're wrong, and you're like, it's the same as what you already have.
Exactly.
Okay.
I get stuck on that sometimes. Why the hell does that say no when it?
And depending where they pulled it, we may be able to even provide that document. Because I'm guessing they pulled it.
Okay, so we're going to get more into that when we go through the full development agreement. The next thing we want to talk about is the
Open space?
open space and, this emerald necklace. So here's I don't know if you guys have seen this.
They're coming that way. All right. Did you get? Okay.
Showing my age, Jeff.
I'm sorry. I don't know why that's so small. There's a bigger.
Yeah.
Well, that one went the way wrong way. Wayne, you get 2. Oh, that. I quit.
You can't do
that. I was thinking the same thing. I'd love to see it.
I feel like you have no. I don't think.
You better head to Atlanta or something because watch out, Barry.
You making an airplane?
Well, hell, last time I threw it, it went through the table. Well, that one didn't do much better either. Am I still supposed to be passing
Sorry,
stuff?
dude. I should have done this differently.
Here, I got a better idea. We're going to go like this. Oh, you got one? Wayne, did you get one of those?
No, sir.
Yeah, okay, no, I didn't, but I will.
Oh, it's on the back.
No, you did. Just go straight front.
Will you pull up?
I'm not throwing any.
Actually, pull up the hydrologist.
Okay.
I did get it. Good.
Yes, fairly. Design
You guys both get
standards.
these.
Yes.
Liam, did you get one?
Got it.
Okay, so before we get into this, we had,
I got it. Now you're gonna share.
as it relates to the river
Thanks,
setback.
Dad.
So what we're wanting to, right, so you guys went from 100 feet to 300 feet 2 years ago now, 2023. This document we'll talk about wherever, the one that says the Emerald Necklace. I want to read that with you guys, but we'll do that after the hydrologist. It talks about the importance of transit corridors not being super large, and then these parks that open up so that you concentrate energy in the right locations, and then your transit corridors are safe, they're maintainable. So the question then, and Charlie, you can talk a little bit about this, but we had a hydrologist study the setback. And Bowen Collins, they're a pretty reputable firm around here. And I just said, will you tell us, is 300 feet, because there's this question of where did 300 feet come from? Is it appropriate? It seems like there's kind of 2 things driving the setback. One is safety, flooding. The other is community. Those are kind of the 2 things that we've heard. So we'll send this out for you for you guys to see. But basically, he went and studied river setbacks in Summit County, Wasatch County, Utah County, Salt Lake County, New York. The 4 other counties along the Wasatch Front, the river setbacks for development are between 50 and 100 feet. There's areas, special areas that people are trying to do different things, but county-wide, those are the setback regulations. Weaver County is the biggest. And then he talks about, if you zoom in,
Which counties have those numbers?
Wasatch, Summit, Salt Lake, Utah. Provo River, Jordan River. And that's in this document.
Zooms in the way.
Did you look at each city or did you just look at the county?
County regulation.
Just county.
County regulation.
I know, I mentioned to you guys earlier, City of Lehigh is 300. They adopted that before we.
I can't zoom in the zoom things right in the way, so.
Okay.
But well, actually, let's go this way. Never mind. Okay, what's that?
Go down to the recommendation. So setback.
that should be.
Okay. So here's one, the Provo River. No, it's not a setback.
You just want the recommendations as part.
No, we can go through like what they.
You want the final one?
Right there for that one. I don't know how to use it.
Sorry, right here.
Go down, one more. Okay.
Stinking Apple computers.
Okay.
There you go.
So Provo River has setback standards that differ by county. Utah County enforces a 100-foot setback, while Wasatch County requires 50 feet. Summit County also applies a 100-foot buffer. These policies aim to balance development with ecological preservation and flood risk reduction. Okay, so then they talk about their recommendation. Okay. Recommendations of the park. The developer recognizes the importance of the 300-foot setback in promoting safety and environmental stewardship. However, they would like to develop within the 300-foot setback while maintaining a distance of at least 100 feet from the river in alignment with the previous setback requirement and because the 100-year floodplain is contained in the channel. Below are the recommended...
Gosh. That's okay.
You're fired.
There we
Like an
go.
idiot.
New driver.
Back to here.
Feels like I've been drinking.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Bouncing all over the
Okay.
place.
Recommended requirements for developing within the 300-foot setback, but at least 100 feet away from the river. Enhanced mitigation measures to offset potential risk. We suggest the following measures: maintaining and enhancing the vegetative buffer within the 100 feet of the river to prevent erosion and protect water quality. Erosion control measures: implementing engineered solutions recommended by a third-party engineer, such as riprap vegetation, stabilization, buried riprap trench, or other mitigation measures to minimize the risk of bank instability or the river meandering within the 100-foot setback. Flood-proofing design: constructing buildings with elevated foundations, flood barriers, or other adaptive designs to withstand potential flooding. Hydrological and environmental studies: evaluating the potential impacts of development on flood risk and river dynamics, identifying any potential effects on local environment and water quality. Stormwater management plans, permit compliance assurances. So basically what he's saying is, I talked to him in length and he said, you know, in terms of flooding, that's something we hear a lot. We care more about flooding than probably anybody, or else we'll have a terrible project. And he feels very comfortable. I mean, what we have to bring the site up to, just from a fill standpoint, is already going to protect us. But then he says it's important to go along that river corridor and say, these are the areas that need to be mitigated, and this is the stuff that needs to happen to mitigate it. And he feels like with what the other counties are doing, with following these recommendations, that a 100-foot setback is more than enough. What we're proposing is a 100-foot minimum with areas that grow to up to 350 feet. And that goes into this document, and you can pull this up. I'll just read it really quick, and I'm sorry that I'm reading so much. But this is Mike Watkins, what they feel like is really important for this community and this development. He's in real quick.
Which paper is it, Jeff?
It's this one.
Okay.
Parks are an essential part of traditional neighborhoods, providing residents with access to nature, recreation, and a chance to meet their neighbors and build community. Well-designed parks concentrate activity, which allows neighbors to meet each other more easily and contributes to a more energetic atmosphere that enhances the experience of visiting the park. These effects are diminished when parks are enlarged. Parks that are needlessly large spread people out and dissipate this energy so that someone passing by might question if anyone ever uses the park as opposed to being excited to visit themselves. Parks are traditionally closely linked to other land uses in a neighborhood. Houses with their porches and front doors, or shops with their sidewalk dining not only bring people closer to parks so that they are encouraged to use them, but they also bring the passive surveillance of residents and passerby, which makes the park feel looked after and safe to use. Parks which are removed from the neighborhood risk seemingly neglected and will not foster community as effectively. This problem is potentially exacerbated where a park is predominantly used for passive recreation, such as trails, and does not attract a great enough concentration to provide this sense of activity and safety. Thus, parks that are closely integrated with the neighborhood not only provide a greater amenity for residents of that neighborhood, but they provide a better experience for everyone who uses the park. Park systems such as the Emerald Necklace in Boston provide a model for how to integrate naturalistic parks into a neighborhood. The Emerald Necklace consists of a series of parks accommodating a wide variety of recreational activities, gathering for events and the like, which are connected by a system of narrow trail corridors. Other cities such as South Bend, Indiana provide modern examples of similar park systems that concentrate investment in a few improved parks that provide amenities to the community, with thinner trail connections that provide a continuous park-like experience for pedestrians and cyclists. This model provides consistent natural corridors that separate development from waterways, while also ensuring that each component of the park is appropriately scaled to best facilitate community at the scale of the greater region. So what we're proposing, if you look at this, we just had Mike put together a trail section, 100-foot section, that shows, and I think some of those trail dimensions are off, but a horse trail, a multi-use trail, you can see how much open space that is from a transit corridor. We feel like 100 feet is actually, we think it's a large area from a maintenance standpoint, but we think it's important for maintaining the river health and providing enough buffer. But what we're hoping is that transit corridor is 100 feet, and then we'll show you the plan where there's lots of sections that open up greater than that. I think our average setback is probably 140 to 150 feet, if you take kind of where we go back 300 feet or more. But we want to concentrate our parks and our energy on those areas, and then have thin corridors where people can connect, throughout the community through those corridors. And then last thing I wanted to show on the river setback is we put together an exhibit. These are two neighboring properties. So it's one thing to, you have a large contiguous piece of property, you do a 300-foot setback, it's pretty damaging in terms of development, but it's not nearly as damaging as if you look at a smaller parcel. So the one on the left is the Larkins, that's just south of this. If you were to apply a 300-foot setback to that property, you're taking 41% of their developable land.
Is that into the blue?
That's the blue, yep.
Okay.
If you go to the Mannings to the north, again, you take that 300-foot setback, you're taking 65%. So
their house wouldn't exist.
Their house wouldn't exist.
Because it goes to 4,700, right?
Yep.
Basically.
And if you look at the river, there's a ton of parcels that are this size or smaller. And we feel like if it's safe, it feels like it's taking a lot to ask for a 300-foot setback. And on our development, we feel like it provides a better community experience if it's a thinner setback that opens up into larger parks that concentrate the energy, versus having a big 300-foot highway from both a maintenance, safety, kind of all those standpoints. So we know this has been a bit of a hot topic. We're curious what your guys' thoughts are on the river setback.
I've actually thought about this a lot. I was one of those, when we first were talking about it, that I was a proponent for the 300 feet, right? Like safety, all that stuff, knowing the flood last year, things like that. But I've spent a grundle of time, especially this year, on this river in some of these areas. And thinking about it and seeing some of the trees that have fallen into the river because of last year. And the size of the tree has had to have been there for, I would say, at least 30, maybe 50 years, because they're just huge, right? Some of those slow-growing trees. So I'm thinking about that, and we're worried about flood and safety. And this river's been there longer than my existence, probably longer than Wayne's existence, right?
Unfortunately. Wayne made that river.
But to think that tree got to that size before it was compromised by some flooding, that's a lot of years of no disturbance to that shoreline or that bank. So, and then I agree with the statements that are in whatever this document is. Using these river trails with my family all summer long, and even now, I agree that having a destination in between these spots on these trails really makes it more user-friendly and more exciting to be there and to go there. And I think that I look at places like Slackwater Pizza here, the old Slackwater on Washington, where it's literally right next to the river. You're looking out the window down the river. Rainbow Gardens, that's been there for 100 years, looking out at the river. And as long as there's structure there to support it, to get things closer there, I think that in some cases, and I'm not an engineer, but I think in some cases you could be even closer than 100 feet to utilize that and to maximize that. I love being on the river. My family loves being on the river. I'd love to have it to myself still. I know that's not going to be possible forever, but I think other families should be able to enjoy it too. And honestly, I feel like as long as we can maintain the safety and integrity of it, we should get more access. If you're 300 feet, less people are going to enjoy that. So.
Comment I have on this is these trees are going to continually to go in this river. It's going to happen. And so I think that whatever that corridor is, it's going to get messed up because we see this picture right here, which one that wasn't here. There hasn't been a excavator in that river in 30 years or more. This river out here, there's a pretty good chance they're going to be in there somewhere every year in high water years. And so I guess the one thing that bothers me is 100 feet with a couple of excavators in there. I know 100 feet seems like a long ways, but when you're in there with those trees and that, I'm not sure that's enough. Because, you know, history, living on the west side of this river with a good experience of 83 was probably the biggest flood we've had since 52, is that ground is at a premium in high water. And so I don't know, I mean, you got a trail system, you got everything there, but the way it's out there today, you're going to knock trees over to get to the river. And so I don't know whether 100 feet is good enough. I don't know.
In terms of safety?
In terms of safety on when you're having to go in and get trees out. These trees are going to go in the river every year when there's high water. Gonna happen. It's been happening my whole life. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times we don't go in there today because it's hard to get property owners.
That's right.
But today, with projects like this, especially if we get them on both sides of the river, we should be able to clean that up to where it's a beautiful river instead of one that's just maintained just when it needs to be. And so I don't know, you know, I'm not a smart enough guy to know whether 100 feet is good enough or we know we're going to be in getting trees out of there. Because there's trees still laying around that river from the last high water.
That's right.
And there's those same trees, there's some of those that were in there since 83. And so that's the only concern that I have is going in there. I think that this project is a beautiful project, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'll give up my duck hunt.
Me too.
For this project. But I guess I just can't get in my head, being down on that river, how that 100 feet is gonna work.
Maybe this will help, Wayne. Bren or Gary, right below 1900 on the river, just south of 12th, is that the county's trail system that we maintain, or is that West Haven, or both?
West Haven.
Because there was a huge washout there this last spring with that flood.
2 years ago when
Was that what it was?
high waters flowed.
And they had to get in there and repair it, right? Because I mean, the trail literally went into the river, the paved trail.
Yep.
It's happened in Riverdale several times. Charlie,
Is
go
that
to
enough
Google Earth.
space to maintain that?
You know, the concern I have about that, and I agree with everything you say, but the soil is different at Rainbow
Take us to Parker
Gardens.
Drive and Riverdale.
It's a different all the way down till you get down to where we are. And you can lose 3 or 4 feet off that bank just like that.
So I think that if you look at the document from the hydrologists, what we're committed to do, because we want it, is in order to develop within that, after that 100 feet, we have to say that it meets all these things. We have to have a geotech. The hydrologist has to see the flooding, has to enhance the bank. So I think part of what it's not going to be what it is today. If we're developing homes around that setback, we have to ensure that it's not going to have a problem. And I don't want to come in here and act like I have a clue what that river does, because I think there's a lot of people that, Gary and Lance, but what I do know is that a lot of engineers that deal with this, we went and toured it, went on site. They don't have any concern with mitigating the river. And a lot of people bring up the flood of '83, and I say, well, State Street and Salt Lake flooded in '83, right?
Right.
There's some things that I think we've gotten smarter since then. But there's probably events that, it's going to be a problem. We got to deal with it. The question of, is 100 feet an appropriate setback to do work? I don't know the answer to that, but it sure seems like 100 feet.
It seems big, but let me tell you, on an irrigation ditch, okay, 15 feet on one side, 5 on the other. I go down there, I can't even turn a 4-wheeler around when I spray that ditch, but it looks big. And I'm just like you're saying, 100 feet seems like a lot. I don't know whether it is or not, because it's not going to take a flood to have to go in and get trees out of that river. I guess that's my point. I think that if you get access, that's the number one thing down there, to get those trees out, which it appears we'll have that. And I'm not smart enough to know whether you get these big boomers in there trying to whirl around, pull trees out. What are you going to do with the tree when you get it out? You going to cut it up and move it, or are you going to pile it up on the ones that's been there for 40 years? What's a river plan? So, like I say, I think this project is a beautiful thing. I think that river, I've only heard one other person say that's a beautiful river, and he's sitting right over there. And it could be, if it's managed correctly. I guess that's my point. And so that's the one thing that I'm not a hydrologist. I'm a part-time farmer.
Yeah.
And I go down there and say, that tree was in the river, wasn't there yesterday. And so I guess, whatever it takes to make sure that we can get the maintenance in there. I mean, the county will be the people who go get it. They got to be able to get in there and go in and get to where they go in and do what they need to do and leave, and still leave it. The trails are still looking nice, and I guess that's just my point here. And if you ask me to solve the problem, I don't know whether I could or not. I mean, I'd love to, but I know that 20 feet isn't big enough on an irrigation ditch for a 4-wheeler with a spray tank on it. Okay? So,
well, I think obviously I'm biased because I feel like it'll be a better community if we do this.
Yeah.
But if you look at all the other counties around the Wasatch Front, their setback they're maintaining those rivers. The Provo River has a ton of trees, and they're able to maintain it with that setback.
See, that's a point that I really have a problem with. Provo River's a Provo River, and the dirt and stuff is Provo dirt. This is Weber County dirt. And that's the problem that I have. I agree. I mean, we got it. Some state, I was sitting at a restaurant in Boise, and a flood's there, and I'm sitting right there at that restaurant watching the water go down the trail. Perfect. I'm dry. My feet's dry. I'm eating my fish at the place. That wouldn't be happening down there. That bank would be getting eaten away. But I'm only really, though, to make a long story short, worried about getting the maintenance on the trees out.
Can I maybe offer a thought on that too? First of all, I don't know if it's my place to even speak at this, because I am not a planning commission member. I'm simply just
Ask Brand.
Brand, am I allowed to speak?
You're county staff, aren't you?
I am. So to your point, and I kind of agree with Wayne a little bit on this. Rivers are different. You're never going to find two rivers exactly alike. And for a lot of the reasons like Wayne mentioned, soil conditions differ from river to river based on geographic location. In fact, the Weber River, you will see different soil conditions on the river from the first time it hits 12th Street at about 1900 West till the second time it hits it at 7 Mile Bridge. Dirt conditions are 100% different. It's gravel at the east end, it's silts and fine sediments at the west crossing. So it's tough to blanketly apply a number that works.
Well, I just made that comment from a maintenance standpoint. I wasn't even talking about.
Totally understand, and I'm not suggesting you're necessarily out of place to make that comment. The other thing to think about too is if you look at the Provo River, think about the impoundments that are on the Provo River. You've got Jordanelle Reservoir, you've got Deer Creek Reservoir, arguably two of the largest impoundments and reservoirs with capacity to store water in the state, if not the northern portion of the state. Yeah. If you look at the Weber River, the closest impoundment we have is Pineview Reservoir. And the reason I'm pointing that out is because that makes a big difference. The way those are run and operated when they start backing up water makes a huge difference. If you go back to 2 years ago, had people known we were going to have the spring we were going to have through March and April, they would have started blowing water in February and January. But if you look at the conditions we were on the heels of 20 years of drought. Right. Nobody wanted to waste a drop of water. So they held every drop back until we got to the middle of March, and we're talking to everybody going, oh crap, we have a problem. And at that point, Morgan City was seeing banks over top in town because they could not move enough water through East Canyon quick enough, because you've got all of the Park City Basin and Snyderville Basin that feeds into that same channel that blows through Morgan. And East Canyon simply didn't have the capacity. And so I bring that up because the Weber is a unique animal. Pineview's our closest impoundment. The next ones up are, I don't know, East Canyon, Echo, Lost Creek. Those three are all kind of equally close. And so what happens is between those impoundments and where your development's going in, you've got multiple drainages that are unrestricted on how they dump into it. You've got multiple cities and jurisdictions that are discharging into this at different rates and different amounts. And it's tough to fight against that because you might have a localized storm that cruises across the lake, picks up all this moisture, dumps it at the mouth of Weber Canyon, and then suddenly you've got this big influx of water. And so it's tough to say, well, okay, this river should be handled just like this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I just for the record, I'm not saying that Weber is the Provo. All I'm saying is it was in response to a maintenance thing that I think 100 foot is 50 feet in lots of areas is a standard, and maintenance gets there, right? I don't know. I'm not suggesting I know. But what I will say is, based on the we'll show that in a minute, but based on the hydrologist report, in order for us to develop along the Weber River, right after that 100-foot setback, we have to do a bunch of studies to show that it's safe.
Yes.
And we want that as well.
Right.
So what's happening, and I feel like, is there's this safety concern from a flooding standpoint. We care way more about, I'm telling, like, if the hydrologist says, I would not put a house within 300, 500 feet from this location unless you do all this stuff, and we're like, wow, that's going to cost a lot of money, let's go 500 feet. Well, we are going to do that. But what we're saying is the 300 feet seems excessive, both in terms of if it can be safely done. Like, there's people that are building along the Weber River. There's lots of homes that are closer than 100 feet from the Weber River.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So I think with, you look at something like this, the fact that we have to do a bunch of studies to make sure it's safe, we feel like we can get to a place where we're comfortable with the safety. And then it comes down to the community aspect. So what happens is, I don't feel like we talk much about community. It's all about the safety and the flooding. And we're saying we're not going to develop unless it's safe. And are you guys okay with a 100-foot setback if we do the work to make sure that it's safe.
I am. Right now, I am. Because you know what's wrong? Part of the, I agree with everything that everybody said here, but I'll tell you what kind of bugs me more than anything about what hasn't been said is the fact that we've got a lot of hard-headed property owners along that river that won't let access to it to clean it like it should be cleaned and maintained. And if that river was cleaned and maintained the way that it should be and kept in condition like it should be, we wouldn't have half the problems that we have on that river. Half of them are controllable and half of them are up to God. That's the way I look at it. So if you can prove to me that 100 foot's enough, I'm in. Because 100 foot is 100 foot more than we have today on both sides of that river.
That's true.
So, you know, I'm sorry, I get a little bit head up. I'm listening, I'm putting all this together in my mind. I'm trying to remember it all, so it kind of gets me a little bit emotional. But in regard to actually doing year-to-year maintenance on that river, it has never really been done. And it's because people won't allow it. And it should be done. It's got to be done. And especially the larger the population along that river gets, the more it needs to be done. This kind of a project allows access to Wayne's Point. That is probably one of the biggest things, and I don't think I get too big of an argument out of Gary on that either.
No.
Access is huge. Access is huge.
I couldn't agree with you more, Andrew. In fact, I didn't finish. I mean, I could go on for hours, right?
Sure.
But
We don't need that.
Please don't.
But to your point, to yours and Andrew's point,
You just cut
it's
Charlie's
amazing how
time
much
off.
access opens up to us as a
He's got a lot of
county.
paperwork
When there's
for us.
problems and there's issues and
Yeah.
people are worried about losing livestock, homes, or
Exactly.
property. So the other thing to keep in mind too, you will never, ever, unless you're God, stop a river from moving. That's just the simple fact of what rivers do. They meander. You look at the county line between Davis and Weber County, it moves every year.
Well, you look at this. They have the report of where the river's been. So this is
Yeah, and that's my point is having that
1855 is the blue
setback.
line.
Having that setback
Say that
gives you
again?
kind of room for the river to move.
1855 is the blue
Yeah, and I think what the hydrologist is saying is the river meanders because there's nothing to prevent it from meandering.
Yeah.
And what they're suggesting, based on all the things they require us to do to develop close, is you have to put in measures to prevent the meandering.
Yeah.
And they do that all over the place.
Of course, you're.
Hell, you'd almost had
anything you
riverfront
do on
property.
the east bank.
In 1855.
Well, the question is, you know, someone got a lot more property.
Yeah. See, the one thing though is whatever mitigation you do on the east bank really affects the west bank.
Yep.
And so, you know, I'm really torn with this because I love the project and I love the access we're going to have. But somebody's got to be smarter than me to say 100 feet or 125 or
But probably in
I don't know.
certain areas it is going to vary.
Yeah, in certain areas I can see that because once the trees are fished out of there and they get control of the growth, they may never go in there again. And I think that that's part of my point here is because the condition of the river as it sets today, there needs to be a lot of work done.
Oh, a ton of work.
Just a couple of things. Can I scoot over close to you?
You can come sit at the table if you want.
Well, I don't feel worthy to sit in a big soft chair. I don't want to. This reminds me of just two things and a quick comment beforehand. Reminds me of a conference call that took place 40 years ago between two groups of engineers. And one said, prove to us it's not safe. In reality, the question should have been, prove to us it is safe. And we all know what happened a few hours after that conversation. The river is not like a river in Wasatch County or Summit County. Those are mountain rivers, and of course the setback up there is probably appropriate for that scenario. And I really appreciate you pulling in the 1855 map. I had that as well, and it's just shocking how much the river can move. So in 2011, I was trying to stabilize it. And Andrew, I went up and down that river, and I only had a couple of people tell me, hell no, I don't want you to remove that sandbar. And I even had to get a sheriff deputy out there on Larry Hansen's property to keep him from.
No.
He's on the planning commission now.
And we actually had to get, in many places, a drag line, Butch Robinson, and throw it out there and pull it in. And yes, the trees are a problem. I appreciate you getting with Bowen and Collins, because they're the ones that did all of the engineering back in 2011 when we did all the projects. And Craig Bagley, is that who you talked to?
Cameron Jenkins.
Oh, I don't know Cameron. I know, is Craig still there? Everyone there?
Greg's in retirement now.
Oh, he's
moving into
retired.
retirement, yeah.
Bully for him. Okay. And I will tell you, you guys at farm understand this. When you flood irrigate, you're pushing water, right? And we even joke sometimes about pushing water uphill. The river gets so flat out here, we're pushing water. We're pushing it. It's not gravity free flowing. We're pushing it. So we've got to stabilize the river. We've got to. If we're going to build this close to it, we've got to do that. No debates, ands, if, or buts. I can't tell you, I cannot prove that 100 foot is not safe. I can't prove that 300 is safe. And Jeff is saying he's open to it.
Yeah.
If I could be bold enough, I think there's 3 really interested parties here that want to make this work and be successful. Gary, the park, and Jeff. And I would propose, Jeff, what if one day the 3 of us sat down for 4 hours, we get the LiDAR out. I've had McBride trying to get the LiDAR, which will really give us some really good detail. And be able to sit down and say, okay, let's compromise. Here we can have a destination. I'm open to maybe not having. I don't dare say because I don't know how sacred the 300 feet is. Okay, but
There ain't no sacred. Just
You're okay with
but
that.
I'm open to coming up with a concept. We talked about that. Let's show me a concept. Let's come up with a concept.
The simple fact that they hired Bowen and Collins to do this, they're not throwing a cheap effort at this.
Right.
You're invested. And I actually appreciate and respect that. I want that noted because they're not going to be the cheapest game in town, but they're going to do a really good job.
I think the thing that I'm hoping is if we can, with Bowen and Collins, and we can prove that the river is safe, right? And again, God could have other plans and they're all screwed, right? I get.
We're not going to prove anything.
No, but you can you try your best to, with data and all this.
Come up with a sound concept.
So to me, it's like if we say we solve safety through all these different measures that we're going to have to prove to ourselves, right? We're not going to do anything that doesn't do that. Then from a community standpoint, what makes the most sense? That to me, because I feel like we're committing to making sure it's safe.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no doubt.
I think that's a fair request. And the one caveat or request back I would have to that, Jeff, is when we're modeling this, let's look at both sides because Wayne and Andrew made a
I think that's
point.
a great point.
Yeah. I can tell you we got within inches 2 years ago of losing that west bank. Yeah. Whereas the east bank still had 1.5 foot in spots.
Well,
so whatever you do to raise that east bank puts that much more pressure.
The nice thing is we control the west side a long ways. And,
you do,
and we have to do this in the development agreement. We have to do this stuff anyway on that side. So
yeah.
Well, and one thing we got to keep in mind, we have to look at this as a system.
Yes.
Okay, that whole loop going out to South Run or North Run and coming back down. We've got to look at it as a system because if we do widen that channel, lay back the banks, to
We're going to be here all
more
night.
Capacity, we're just going to. We can't handle. We have to be wise and prudent about it because if we say, we can handle 7,000 CFS, well, that's ludicrous because we can't handle 7,000 CFS in Riverdale, at Fort Buenaventura, on 21st Street. So we've got to look at it as a system, and if we have too much conveyance, then we're flooding the guys downstream, which every year, I'm sure you were with an inch or two of overtopping down on McFarland's.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
Heslips and Martinis.
We did in a lot of spots.
Yeah, so we, I said before, we're closer than we think, okay?
Yeah.
And I really think if the three of us, with Warren and Collins, sat down, and I'll figure out how to get the LiDAR. We've got the LiDAR, and you know what, maybe Bowen and Collins has a copy of it, I don't know. Might check with him.
Does this second page, Jeff, represent what they feel is a proposed?
No, this is Mike Watkins. This isn't.
That's the open
So
space.
this represents about, just the green area represents about 62-ish acres of open space.
Okay.
So when we were talking about open space before, like a big chunk of what we're required is already in the slough and in the trail system, and then we would have to come up with the additional open space throughout. But this, again, this is a concept. When we get into phasing, this is when we would hire and have to check all those boxes. And all we're saying is, can we reduce it so that where we are really interested, because we feel like we're going to get the safety down, we're interested in having thin transit corridors that open up in the parks. And we feel like that'll be a better experience along the river for the community. Versus a 300-foot section that the county has to maintain, or we have to figure out how to maintain. It's not going to feel safe. It's not going to have the energy that we want it to have.
Aesthetically, it would be more appealing, I think, having the things.
I've got another question. Just the slough over there.
Yeah.
You just going to leave that the way it is, or are you going to try and improve that? Or
So the intent is to improve it. It's part of our stormwater plan.
Can you reserve a single duck blind for Wayne and I?
Yes.
We can pretend, right? Yeah, we'll shoot the camera instead.
You have to be 600 feet away.
So, planning commissioners, on the subject, you guys already know what my opinion is. It hasn't changed, and so I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on that. I do, regardless of what my opinion is, regardless of what the general plan says, what they're proposing, I think, is a beautiful asset. Any other community, if I went and walked down the river walk that they're proposing, I'd say, wow, somebody planned this really well. So I did mention to Lance one of the times we met, I mentioned to Gary one of the times we met, that we should focus on something that Jeff just said. I don't think this is a flood issue. I don't think this is a safety issue. I think what this is a question of community. When we went through the general plan process, we talked about community. And certain things got into the general plan. Now, I don't think, one of the exercises that I'm going to ask you guys to do as we go through the approval process is to check in with our Parks and Open Space chapter and check the boxes. Does it check the boxes? There's only one thing I think that it might not check. Maybe it checks all the other boxes. And to me, that's probably good enough. I don't know that we even need to change the general plan if it checks all the other boxes. I keep on going back to something that Roger Heslip kept on bringing up, that as the community develops, which nobody out there wants to see, apparently, according to Roger, the only benefit that they could see coming out of new development coming in is the ability to get away from it in a natural space that feels like you're in nature, even though you're actually walking through the middle of a pretty busy system. And when I think about what is a natural space, a natural corridor, is 100 feet that? I'm not sure it is. Is 300 feet that? I don't even know what that is. In fact, you guys remember from the general plan, I said maybe we need to do 500. But the bigger you get, the harder it gets to ask of the developer for a variety of reasons, but also the harder it gets to operate and maintain. One of the things I mentioned to Jeff as we were looking at what can the alternatives be, what is best practices, what is it that the buffer does for us along that riverway? Because it's certainly not just floodplain management and risk management. It's also not just open space. It's also, there's an ecosystem there. It's protection of this ecosystem.
Wildlife corridor.
Well, and so I started thinking about wildlife corridors, and I grew up hunting. I'm not a big hunter now, but I kind of understand a little bit how middle-sized big game works. And they need a place that has a lot of distance to bed down in certain locations. And then they can run down little corridors to get to the next place to where they head down. And so something like a big open space or a big meadow area that then channels down along the riverway that opens up into a big meadow area is probably just as good, maybe even better. You might find a wildlife biologist that say it's actually better to do it that way. And so it is important for us to think maybe 300 doesn't have to be the thing that we're locked in on, but what is it that 300 does that we want it to do? The general plan talks about riparian corridor, talks about ecology of the river, it talks about allowing the river to be what it wants to be. It talks about allowing people to go out, find nature, blow off steam. It talks about parks, improved parks. It talks about using the riverway as access to these emeralds, these emeralds in the necklace of improved parks. So I know this is if the community, this is what I told Jeff the other day, if the community hadn't had been so, insistent that certain things happen along that riverway, this wouldn't even be a question in my mind. I like what they're proposing. I'd say, let's do it, this is an asset. The only reason why I continue to put a little pressure back on that is because I don't want this community to come back and say, you said, and then you didn't. And so it'd be helpful to have a sense of support from the community on something like this before we deviate. However, maybe there's other negotiation that can happen.
Well, and I think, I mean, I agree with all of that. I think my response to that would be the fact that you're getting a corridor on both sides of the river to the public, and then the river itself is however wide that is a huge win that the community does not have today.
Huge.
Right?
Yep. Absolutely.
And I don't think if you look at this map, the community does not know what 300 feet does for all the property owners along the corridor.
Yeah, and I don't think we should focus on the other property owners. Again, I'm not pushing the 300 right now. I don't think we should focus on them because each property owner is we're gonna have to do our own analysis.
No, I'm not suggesting. All I'm saying is when you talk about what the community thinks thought they were getting, I think I wasn't part of that, but I think the benefit the community is getting is access to that river that they don't have today.
Agreed.
And in a way that is safe, that concentrates the energy in the right locations.
Yeah.
Like Lance and I, wherever Lance is, the concern is you have to get this right. Like you can't screw this up.
Yep.
And we feel the same way. If we give you 300 feet that will never be maintained, it doesn't feel safe. I run on the Jordan River. There are sections of that I'm like, this is sketchy because it's so big, it's not maintained. When you have concentrated areas of energy from a community standpoint and narrow transit corridors, it feels better.
Yeah, and I wouldn't argue that at all. I'm not arguing in favor of the 300. Just trying to make sure that as the Planning Commission looks at this, there's the whole reason why we do general plans isn't because we're all sitting around the fireplace singing campfire songs. It's because when hard decisions need to be made, the plan helps us focus back on what was the reason why we did things. So my encouragement would be just pull that section of code up, pull that section of general plan up, see if what's being proposed fits that. If it does, great. Maybe we reduce it to 100 feet the whole way in exchange for a larger regional park that the community can use, that the park district can own, operate, and maintain. So when I think about this overall, the amount of acreage along the riverway, if we stuck with 300 feet, it's about 73 acres. It's not a small amount of acreage. In fact, the 1,400, this is a 515 acre development and 73 acres along the riverway, according to my calculation. The 1,400 acre development to the south only has 55 acres along the riverway that they would need to dedicate instead of 300. So you can see how they would feel it's a little bit disproportionate to ask for that. However, if we're looking at 10 acres per 1,000, we're looking at about 93 acres overall. And so when we look at 93 acres, do you want 73 of those 93 acres to be along that river corridor? Or would you rather see some of that remaining 20 acres to go towards improved parks? What we're asking for of other developers is to try and get the community to a standard of 40% of the park acreage improved, 60% natural. And when I say natural, I mean natural with a trail running through it, so you have a little bit of improvements, trailhead and stuff like that. If we put that much riverway on this developer, we're asking for 85% natural riverway, and then for them to meet the rest of that 10%, we don't have those really usable park spaces. So a lot of different competing interests here. I know the way that the future land use map showed a nugget of green space. Maybe there's some way to come to some consensus where, all right, have 100 feet like we used to have, and maybe there's a good 10 acre, 20 acre park that can be a park complex. Or, I don't know, other ideas on the table. Just trying to find out.
And I think we definitely want larger areas where people can gather, but what we don't want is too big where it ruins, the community.
Yep.
We don't want that, and it again, if you study these places, that's not what it is. It's more intimate. It's people you want to go there and spend time with your family, makes it feel safe.
I would agree the worst thing that we could do is get all that land and not be able to do anything with it. Now, 100 years from now, we might look back and go, man, I wish we would have done a quarter mile, not 300 or not 100. So that's always worth putting in your hat as well. But now until 100 years from now, someone's got to take care of it. And that's,
These rivers have been developed for those 100 years, though, and look what they have, and they make them work.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that it doesn't work that way. It definitely works that way, and it provides valuable community spaces. You're not tearing houses down later, though.
And those rivers are nasty rivers.
But this part of this
They let sewer
conversation
go into their rivers.
comes back to what Jeff was saying before about the other property owners. When you have somebody who just owns property right along the bank of that river, and you take that 300 foot and it takes 70% of their property.
65%.
You remember both of those parcels. The reason I say let's not focus on those is because the general plan shows both of those parcels as being park open space anyway.
But I'm just like, there's lots of little, and I agree, Charlie. I don't want to get off. That's nothing to do with. I'm just saying, we act like this is what the community wanted. I don't think the community understands. Like all the property owners all along that river, who's the only people that are impacted really by that 300 foot setback. It's a huge ask, and the question is, what is it for?
Maybe if we're decreasing the space, do you know what your proposed structures would be? Is it housing? Is it some of this commercial stuff? Like, what do you want to do for people?
So I mean, the concept plan, it's a lot of it's housing, and then there's areas. I mean, we would love, to your point, I don't think we're going to get it. We would love to have a cafe that's closer to the river. We would love that. There are areas where we're putting those, that farm to table restaurant right up against the 100 foot setback.
That's what I envision as being beneficial. Somebody that not living in the community, coming there, accessing trails, and then saying, "Oh, let's stop and get ice cream," or whatever, and actually utilizing the neighborhood, or going in on another trail a little bit closer, thinking that way. I don't know. But
We did have that good conversation. It was on the south side. It was on the flagship. I can't remember. Don't know why I can't remember their name. On the flagship property, about them building a potential riverwalk and having some commercial access and space right there on that riverfront. I remember having that because I remember somebody laughing about trying to have beautiful frontage on the mud river, right? Now,
mosquitoes or whatever.
That doesn't mean that there's not water clarifying ways that we can help recover that river for the future. But I don't know if a little cafe overlooking the river is a bad idea. You can have a cafe overlooking the river with a nice amount of native space around it, whether that's 100 feet, whether that's 3,000 feet. That's probably okay. You wouldn't want to put that down as a blanket statement, but in unique developments like this, I think we can find ways to make stuff like that.
If I'm remembering correctly, I mean, that's kind of what the whole proposal was for this whole community, was mixed use, everything kind of mixed up together, right? So people are walking rather than going clear across. Even this community is a big community. Going clear across that to get something is a waste. So
Yeah, agreed.
I guess to just cut it short, we're concerned about safety, figure that part out, and then personally I feel like utilize it the best that we can. Propose things that are going to be close to there, also things that are going to be safe close to the river, right? Like I've said, I've spent a lot of time on the river lately, and in one section where there's a whole pile of logs that I'm sure you can't get access to, that it's blocking everything, there's literally 12 soccer balls in there, and there's not a soccer field close to that. So don't put a park close to the river. I don't know where those soccer balls come from, but don't put a park close to the river either, just for things like that.
That sounds like it's begging for a park right now. Balls want to go somewhere.
True. But I think we utilize it the best that we can, so it's going to be fitting for the community. And
Comment?
yes, there are people in the community that are against it, but as you've seen with Farmington and all those other places, we're all utilizing those areas, and we get used to it, and we will utilize those.
Against access to that corridor, you mean, or against?
No, like just in developing it all, really. Yeah. So,
I kind of think we're all on the same page.
yeah.
And I think Lance is too. And I think they should get together like Lance suggested, from 100 to 300 and make it work. I think we're talking about it too much right now. And I think we're all at the same point. 100's great for most of it, make some nice areas in it, and go back together. I think you almost said it. Does it meet the spirit of the law?
That's right.
Okay.
That's the question.
Well, add on to Uncle Jed, my mind's flooded now, so.
Sorry.
Flooded?
Yeah, it's flooded.
We've done it.
We've overran it.
We need some safety measures.
Is it park for flooded?
Geneva, slap Charlie, keep me away. So you can't count the whole meeting.
We still got 2 hours with Charlie next, so.
I was trying to be as quiet as I could on that subject, because you guys, we've already talked about it. We've beat that horse, I think. I think this is your guys'
I think the general consensus is bring a proposal, right?
Yeah.
And put something behind it.
Get the information, make sure where it's safe to.
Yeah,
I'm good with
so I
it.
think what we're proposing is a 100-foot setback. It has to meet all
Hell, we
these.
even board lands out. That don't have to
We
break.
have to meet all these things if we're going to develop up to 100 feet, and know that there's going to be. We want it based on our concept. We want those larger areas along the river.
Are there areas where you feel like it's not going to be 100 feet? It's going to be 300
Yeah.
feet
Yes.
anyways?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
our
like
max
100 feet
is
isn't
like
like the
350.
consistent.
No, it's not going to. And it's. Mike's point was nature isn't doing this consistent 100, right?
Yeah.
And we just want it to be the setback is 100 feet, and we're gonna ebb and flow based on safety, based on parks, based on all that stuff.
So Bren just mentioned, bring a plan, let's have a look at it, we're probably going to be okay with something. What I'm hearing from Jeff is, that is the plan, you have it. Are you guys okay with that plan?
No, I want to see what Bowens and Collins, I want to see that report. I want to see what they're saying.
And what they're in that report, it says this is what we recommend. You do all of these things.
Yes, and I think we want to see the areas along here of where those are going to be and kind of how it's going to look.
Okay.
Kind of a bigger blown in version.
Give us an idea of
Yeah,
what it's going to do.
So
and
you have this section, this section that then opens up into. Okay.
give us something to look at and to put it back to, and
So we can
based
talk
on the
about it out
information, so we can spend more time with it.
Jeff, it
Get
might
it
give
to
us
us
a chance
before
to give you some valuable feedback on some of those areas too. because
Yeah.
We may have seen some issues and problems, and
That's great. Yeah, we
That's where that meeting with you and Lance.
The 4 hours. I am.
I don't know that it's
By the way, Lance in a public meeting complained that I gave him 2.5 hours.
And if you do have that meeting, invite the other Parks District as well, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, we'll do
All
that.
of them.
Jeff, regarding.
Well, I don't know if it's so much a Parks District discussion or just a river history discussion.
Bank stabilization.
I'm not seeing Lance there as a Parks District member. I'm seeing Lance there as history of the river based on what's there.
And former
What you're
EMS.
saying.
Well, he does have information.
Lance has been.
That's where I see Lance. This isn't a Parks discussion right now.
No.
This is the discussion of Gary knows what that river's been doing. He's been managing it. Get other people to get in there, and then they'll probably shoot me, but get Joe and Jared in there because they've been the ones down there on the river when this goes on.
That's the people that need to come sit around the table with these guys, because engineers can show one thing on a map, but the people that down there watch it flow when it gets in these situations also has a lot of information to put in
Everywhere
there.
that's close to
And
the
address
property,
the
or is
issues
that
when you
just?
can't-
Well,
Exactly. So those people need to sit around that table. And once you guys kind of get together with reports and actual
we'll send it. We have it.
boots on the ground knowledge, then bring something back to us to say, this is what kind of come out of
Here are
it.
the recommendations for both.
That makes sense.
So I'm not trying to exclude Joe, but I just don't think it's a parks
The reason I
thing.
mentioned that is from a representation of the public, so to speak.
They'll provide the studies.
Well, but this isn't a public point. At this point,
Then I-
it's,
then I-
I think it's, get the people there that know something.
That's all
And
we're about.
we did invite Joe the time the Lance came, and so we've reached out to them, and we keep them definitely in the loop. And,
We'll meet.
Perfect.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Gary,
Well,
Gary, Jared,
Because
Joe.
They've got Black Pine on the other side of the river.
Right.
You on
And
there?
so there's a lot of this going on.
Yes.
You know, they didn't have to walk through my place, they walked right.
But when you get to a Parks District discussion, yeah, then that's when I
And then
think
they pull it up.
Joe and Lance, they could come into those meetings, but right now.
That 300 feet.
That's what,
But the reason
Yeah.
they had to flood the course,
To
because
them.
they made trees for.
Yes.
I've told them
that's
I've
what
spent
should have been done
You
over
proved
the
to me
years, is
I don't
get
know,
them
that
out
it's
and
safe.
burn
But
them
last
up.
time that
Be
river
done
was
with them.
touched.
I'm in.
Core went through.
Because
there.
that'll make
You
that
go
river
flood-
better than it's ever
flood
been
like in the 50s.
forever.
Yeah, we feel the same. We care. We care more. We care to make it a great.
I thought we ended this water flow discussion.
To end,
think we
is there
did.
anything? So next week we're going to go over development agreement design code.
Yep.
Is there anything else you guys want us to address? I know you're sick of this. And I'm sorry.
Do you guys have as much of that done that I could send to them?
Yes, we
Yes.
will send.
The more stuff you can give us beforehand is going to be a lot better, so
We'll
that we
send as
can.
much as we can this week,
Yep.
and then we'll be ready then.
And I'll send you all these exhibits, or I'll put them in Frontier so you can send you, so you'll have everything electronically too.
When,
Send it to me. I hate Frontier.
when you can.
I tried looking at this stuff in
You know
Frontier
what?
and it made no sense to
Get
me. You
them
upload
to
it. so.
Tiffany or Charlie, and then they'll.
We'll get
Get
it.
it.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll get you guys in a packet.
Yes.
When you say this week, do you mean tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Today's
Maybe
Tuesday.
tomorrow.
Because staff reports were due today.
See you guys.
Tomorrow.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming, Gary.
Thanks,
Thank
Gary.
you, Gary.
Okay, we'll get out of here.
Okay, yeah, good luck with the rest.
Hey, thanks you guys for
Thank you.
listening.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Peace out.
Thanks, guys. Talk soon.
Thank you.
I've really been itching to watch some videos my wife sent me.
Oh, Jeff's not going that
I just learned.
Holy crap, my mom's on a horse.
way. Thanks, Liam.
Maybe she's constantly.
I got one. I don't know if I want one.
Well, that's kind of, I don't know what to tell you. Thick. Kind of on.
I've got one, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yours is probably better.
Or rodeo over there?
You're welcome.
Yes, little action.
Andrew,
No,
you
we
have
just had the. I forgot we had a work session night, so tonight's one of the nights I got the
Now
arena
we're
in.
gonna talk about trees.
Slow clap. Let me pull a couple things up to get ready for this. You guys ready to start talking, or do we move?
Go. Oh, you gotta pee. Great, he's got to pee.
5-minute recess.
Jump up and down.
5-minute recess?
5-minute recess. Everyone's got to go to the bathroom. Is it dead?
Oh, can I pause it? No.
Yeah, we probably wore that.
Anything to show you guys?
Oh, so we're done?
No, I'm on the screen.
That's a record.
I mean, we're gonna be done.
Okay, Reader's Digest version, Charlie.
Yeah.
Book review at the back of the page. That's it.
How about planning for dummies?
Report on
You're
it.
gonna have my picture with a bio on the back.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So before we dive in too deep on this, just kind of setting up. I've been struggling a little bit in my mind to think about how to best approach this with you guys and with the county commissioners in terms of how do we best review this document and whether or not this is the right way to go. This document is the result of a lot of conversation being had by the administration, saying a lot of what we're doing in terms of development agreement negotiation is taking a lot of staff time. And if we still had Bill and Steve and the funding for Bill and Steve, that's a different story. We could definitely do those things. But the other thing is that we talked to you guys about when we were doing the general plan, and we definitely emphasized with the county commissioners, is if we do this general plan, we have to accept that we will be a city, even if nothing ever incorporates. It will be a city, and you're going to need to have the tax base necessary to pay for those city kinds of services. If we do the general plan the way the general plan says we should do it, we can't just go adopt ordinances that say, thou shalt dedicate 83 acres of the land as open space. Right? We can't. That would be a taking. The only way we're getting things like open space, like $7,500 per front door, like trails and stuff like that above and beyond that are providing for the existing community is because we're doing it through a development agreement and a rezone. So development agreement and rezone, well, a contract, the legal term is consideration. Every contract has consideration. There's a reason for you to enter the contract. There's a reason for me to enter the contract. Both sides have something that's considered in here. The developer's consideration, from the county's perspective, developer's consideration is they're getting more density, right? They're also maybe getting some more uses, depending on what the development is. But I think the biggest consideration for that developer is they're getting more density. The consideration for the county is much bigger than they're getting more density. It's we're getting street connectivity, we're getting trail connectivity, we're getting parks and open space, we're getting all kinds of crazy stuff that we wouldn't otherwise get if we were just doing 50,000 square foot lots or quarter acre lots out here. So the way that our general plan is set up and the way that we've been doing rezones, I believe the county gets an exceptional amount of public amenities out of these developers. Even the developments that Jeff has mentioned are not creating sense of place or sense of community. Even the small ones we've been doing, the 40 acre, 20 acre ones. We're getting some really cool stuff out of those developers. Well, hopefully.
Wait, we're maybe getting some good money out of them, but how that money's being spent.
That's yet to see.
We're building a parking lot.
There is a parking lot, it's built.
I have a comment
Plant
on
grass and
Building a parking lot
and stuff going, and then
they just applied to put a gazebo in,
Little
or
backwards.
a pavilion in over there. So they're going to be expanding that a little bit.
I have a
gazebo
comment.
to go play in the weeds.
Sorry.
One building at a time, right?
I have a comment. It's kind of an oxymoron when we want attainable housing to slap $7,000 on the top of every builder's door.
One of the things that we've done is
And
if it's
I'm not done.
Okay, sorry.
And I know that these people coming out there, and I'm out there, are encroaching on our territory. We've never had parks.
Right.
Every one of us go over to Plain City to put our kids in a rec, and then when West Haven come, now they go over there. We've never had parks to service. So I think there ought to be some type of tax, and I'm part of that goes with the people who are already there, so that you're just not putting on top of every kid that buys a home.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you.
It's a very good way to look at it.
A little bit outside of our wheelhouse, but it's certainly something worth bringing up with the commissioners. The other thing the commissioners have
And I don't disagree.
to figure out is if we do a unique development agreement for every single development, you've got basically several dozen, if not 100, development agreements that are essentially its own land use code that is a supplement to the rest of the land use code. 100 years from now, that is going to be a nightmare. I mean, the cost to run the planning division right now is $1.5 million a year, one of the most expensive ones. The amount of money the planning division brings in is a couple $100,000 a year. So the municipal services dollars that you guys all pay in taxes, that 3% of your tax, is primarily going towards paying Liam's time being here, my time being here, Gary's time.
Well, if they didn't pay Liam so much damn money.
Yeah.
Damn lawyers.
That said, with the Ogden Valley incorporating, when we pull out the revenue that they're paying, as well as pull out the services we're providing them from that calculation, the municipal services fund is in the hole $4 million.
So we're going to come out in the hole if they pull away? $4 million?
Yep, and they will pull away. They did vote to pull away, so Right now, it's not a question of whether or not they will incorporate. Now it's a question of what are the sizes and shapes of their precincts or voting districts. And then in November, well, coming up in March, they'll have people to get on if there's primaries and all that. Actually, I don't think they did
I hate to
bipartisan.
be a landowner.
So it'll actually be in November. They'll have an election.
Family living.
Well, if they have more than a certain number, they'll have to have a primary, even without parties.
A runoff or.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we should then we should know in March, right?
Their filings, yes, I believe.
Because convention is
Well, it has nothing to do with filing
Or
for
caucus.
convention. I don't think they have to file till June.
okay. That said, we know that we're going to be negative $4 million come potentially 2026, January.
Is that
2026.
taking away the services that you're not going to provide anymore?
It is.
So it's a net.
Yeah. In other words, they have very expensive properties that the county taxes, and so they were providing a benefit to the Western Weaver folks. Through
All
that.
ours is green belt, and there ain't a lot of tax. Everything up there is paying high taxes.
I get it.
Yeah, and a lot of up there is second homes, so they're paying even higher than high. But that said,
So if they come from California, it's double.
you know what? We should just make that across the board. If they come from California, no matter where they move. That said,
Subdivision, I do.
they're not going to fund the 2 lost positions that we have, and every position that we do lose, or every employee that we do lose over the next year and a half or so, they're going to continue to not fund that. So we lost a plans examiner over in the building department. They're just going to contract out for those services. There's still the money until 2025, till this time next year. And the county, even on January 1, 2025,
2026.
thank you, we're in 25, in 2026, they're not going to have, well, unless they meet on January 1st, their council does, and adopt a resolution saying, we hereby create our own Parks Department, Planning Division, all that kind of stuff, which they won't do. The county will still be providing them some services until they do get all their stuff in order. I think the very first thing they'll do is they'll probably adopt a temporary zoning ordinance, which would be a moratorium for 6 months, which takes a lot of burden off of our backs. They probably won't do a lot of contracting with the county for planning services, probably a lot more for engineering and snow plowing and stuff like that. Because planners are the reason why they incorporated it. Give them a good excuse.
Way to go, Charlie.
So how much overhead you
create
gonna
cities.
charge?
What's that?
How much overhead you gonna charge them?
Hopefully a lot more than they charged me at Slaterville.
Well,
$4 million I hold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
all of that's up in the air. All the financial side, I don't mean to get into a financial conversation. All the financial side is up in the air because we won't know until that council is elected in, at least council-elect next November, what it is they're even going to be asking for, and they can't take any official action until January. So Scott Park, our comptroller, says all their money is going into a fund, and some of that money we can still use, and we'll be using it for contracted services so that we don't have to, so we're not refilling positions that go vacant. But the department is still essentially funded the same that it was last year. And that'll go through 2026, basically. And then after that, we'll have a better understanding of what's going to happen there. What that tells me now is that the premium service that the Weber County Planning Division provides to developers, which is a lot of meetings above and beyond, well above and beyond what they pay in their application fees, that's going to be cut back. We're going to have to reduce our level of service. In fact, I hate to have that happen because I think a lot of the good stuff that we've come to in at least Western Weber, even Ogden Valley, even though they don't like the good stuff we're doing.
Apart from there.
Yeah.
There we go. I know the heat's turned off. You get chilly, huh?
I think that there is ingenuity and innovation that exists when you've got enough space for it to exist. And our department, Planning Division, has had the luxury of having that space, right? So we're not running around chasing our tails trying to get land use permits done, given some of us some opportunities to look at stuff like this, look at big developments, talk to developers, talk to planning commissioners, spend a lot of time talking about how the general plan works, and I think it shows. So I'm not really looking forward to how this is going to work out, because I think we're going to have a lot of developers complaining that they've lost the level of service that we've previously provided. That's the overarching conversation for this document. We've got a lot of routine.
They can pay more.
Well, so if not to make it a financial conversation, the commissioners are aware that they need to raise fees, and we have full justification. Fees right now are 50% of what they should have been in 2017, excuse me. So 2017, we could have doubled the fees that are there now. So a subdivision application, for example, you're looking at, if you're doing a 20-lot subdivision, you're probably paying close to $2,500 total. That could be a $5,000 fee. Now,
Recently, they pay the water district $4,000, and we don't do near what you do.
One thing that we can't do is we can't charge above and beyond.
You're in the green.
That's right.
Well, in my opinion, and why we changed it, it shouldn't be back on the backs of all the other users for all the work that's got to go in if they're bringing the change in, right?
That's right.
Your water bill shouldn't go up. Just like this, our taxes shouldn't go up to support the development.
And if you looked at...
but that contradicts what we just talked about.
Right.
How do we get to attainable without it? So,
so I've got an answer for attainable right here, but I just wanted to make sure we put that umbrella over this conversation. Basically saying we're trying to find a way to make things more efficient. And I think we're developing a way to do it without losing the level of flexibility we have in creating development agreements. And it's creating a one-size-fits-all development agreement. And that's not going to be wonderful. But for these 20-acre, 40-acre, 80-acre developments, all the ones from Stagecoach, Anselmi, Lone Tree, Navy Meadows, all of them could have...
Where's Lone Tree?
Did it develop?
That's west of the...
High school.
West of the 10 acres west of the park.
Single
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Single.
Okay, I'm with you now.
All of them could have used this document, in my opinion. This document is incredibly heavy in favor of the county. And it has to be because it's the 300-foot rule. We're casting a net, and it's as wide as that net can be to try and preserve whatever it is that's in there. And so the policy consideration of having a document like this is on the one hand, it's going to be a lot more efficient for staff to do. Here's the development agreement to the developer. Here it is. If you don't like it, you're not developing. Now, there is a way to, I'll show you in here, we've got little provisions where we can add special stuff based on unique circumstances. But if we could do it this way, and we just outright told developers that this is how it's got to be done until we figure out a different way to fund the department, I think we could continue to do what our general plan is asking us to do. If we can't do something like this, then if the administration is going to ask us to roll back the amount of time and effort we put into this kind of stuff, my recommendation to you guys and the county commission is going to be roll up the red carpet. And I told the county commissioners this already. Roll the red carpet up. General plan is great. We spent a lot of time making it. Maybe it can be implemented in 3 or 4 years when they figure out the financial problem. And so maybe we stop doing rezones for a little while. Because if what Sean Wilkinson mentioned is maybe we don't have to negotiate this in a development agreement, we could just create a zone. Well, like I mentioned before, you can't say $7,500 per front door to the park district in your zone. That would be an illegal exaction. Because we know for sure that $7,500 per front door is not just their impact. We're trying to get them to pay for others as well.
Right.
Right. That would be an unlawful exaction. If we gave somebody the R115 zone and said, through the zone, not through a development agreement, this is what you got to do, they're going to say, I don't have to do any of that stuff because that's all asking for things well beyond our impact on this community. But through a development agreement, through a rezone, you can get those kind of things. So, on the subject of attainable housing, I was going to tell you I have this in here, but I realized just a second ago that I don't. the development agreements that we have been creating, at least over the last year, has a little provision that says for homes under a certain size or homes that are deed restricted to a certain amount, that it makes it an attainable housing. Things like the park district, that donation can be forgiven. So no requirement there. Other things that make things more expensive. For example, if we did solar panels, we were going to say you don't have to do solar on those. So how do we help them make those less expensive?
Somewhere.
Yep. So we're trying for that. But the other side of the coin is in terms of so we've got attainable housing. The other side of the coin is when we talk to the public about the general plan, when we went through the general plan process, we kept on hearing things like, we don't want to be Syracuse. I drive around Syracuse, and it's not that bad.
Every road out there is
It was West Point, not Syracuse.
Yeah, West Point.
Yeah, but we can't say
We
that
didn't want to be
anymore.
West Point.
Okay.
Syracuse is, I don't think Syracuse is bad, but West Point's got some pretty,
Now, Syracuse 10, 20 years ago, I would say
It's still a nice area.
Doesn't have a road.
Syracuse
Doesn't have a
had struggled, but over the last 10, 20 years,
They don't.
Syracuse, they've got a cool town center, they're working on town centers, they've got,
Yeah.
regardless of that, what I heard from the public was, if developers are gonna force their development on the rest of us who want this to stay country, make it the Cadillac version. Don't give us the Pinto version of development. So I'm saying all that because as we read through this, your eyes are going to get big on a few things. You're going to be like, whoa, that's a lot. That's a lot to ask for. And the reason it's in there is because, again, it's one size fits all. In some cases, some of it might not make sense. Other cases, it's going to make a lot of sense. And if we're going to do this in a way that's quick, easy, efficient, we're going to have what I call casualties of zoning. Things that just don't make sense apply to developments that it's just there because we don't have time to negotiate otherwise. That makes sense?
Street trees.
Put some,
But is
some
it
flexibility
That's
in
it.
here.
But
You see,
There, we do have availability for flexibilities.
Okay.
So there's a national convention on improvement contracts that you get like through big industries, big construction industries, and what they've done is they've got a bunch of paragraphs that all say boilerplate. It's the boilerplate. It's all these paragraphs, and you basically go through and you nix the one, you put omitted in there. If it doesn't apply, you use the ones that do apply. That's kind of how this is set up. And then in between, with that boilerplate language, you've got the ability to put, actually, the way the National Convention is you create a supplement. And it says in your supplement, that section that said this for this project is hereby amended to say this. What we're recommending is we'll just keep some space in between the paragraphs to allow for some unique things to go in there. So, okay.
is it negotiable at all? If somebody takes this home, developer comes in, grabs it, takes it home, reads it, says, red lines it like I would do a contract and comes back? Or is it a non-negotiable opportunity?
There's red line, there's black line. The black line, I would say...
That's redaction.
I would say what you see in here that is black should, I'm not going to say has to in all cases, but should stay the same. And one of the reasons for that is because in the future, when you've got 2 planners instead of 4 or 3 that we have right now, when you have 2 planners trying to administer this, they're going to know exactly what section 8.9.3.5 says. They're going to know what that says. And if you make tweaks to it, they're going to start making mistakes because they'll think they know what it says in that document, but that one's different than that one.
Different, yeah, right.
That's why it's really important to try and stay as consistent as we can, and then only provide flexibility in the spots that are intended for flexibility. That future planner can then, on a case-by-case basis, say, okay, I need to go check this section to verify what are the setbacks, what are, that kind of stuff. So yes, we can create flexibility. My preference would be very sparingly, unless it's in the spaces between paragraphs. Okay, so we'll go through that. Let's see. That's the other thing. I kind of wanted to set up a framework with you guys before we even started doing any detail. In fact, I kind of want to set up a framework to just have you guys go home and read it.
Hey Charlie, just a quick comment. Being one that kind of feels like the same rules should apply to everybody, I agree with something like this. There is a little bit of flexibility, and I think that developers will probably feel better about it too. It might not feel like it, but one of the biggest complaints I hear is Weber County is such a pain because all the rules are different all the time for everybody. It depends on how you negotiate and all this other stuff.
I agree.
This makes it black and white. You're pretty close to it.
Yeah, okay.
So you're like, I know what the expectations are. I might have a little bit of flexibility, but I know what I need to do.
And if we do it right and we get into a good group, you won't have to have extra staffers filling in.
And on this side of the table, I feel like every time we do these little special things, you're doing a favor for somebody. And it just doesn't always feel right. And then that's when the public starts looking at you like, oh, you did a favor for somebody. It's like, well, we had to make this work. And that gets rid of that feeling for me.
Perfect. But conversations like, for example, 300-foot setbacks, those aren't going to be
Every day.
right.
Yeah.
Unique developments like theirs, like Flagship, those ones will still have unique development agreements, but this is just for Pat Burns. And
The ones that are doing the same thing.
Delete that.
he was here. I would have said it with him too.
Right. He would
That's still
not.
hysterical.
I seen you glance over there first.
he takes ribbon pretty well. But really, I mean, he's put a few things together that had we had a standard agreement, we would have been a little bit better off. Okay. That's part one. Part two, chapter 2. Working through some legalities with Liam on how this works. Best way to. Casey, you mentioned if we have something that's a little bit more one size fits all, it's more predictable. Developers know what they're getting into. I would agree with you. In some cases, a developer is going to look at how heavy this slants towards the county. They're going to say, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
However, what's their alternative? If they just go to whatever the zone is, for example, the county could change those rules out from under them. Stagecoach.
Meaning like they'd stay A1. I mean, the development agreement comes into place because they're asking for the
Extra
rezone,
stuff.
right? Yes.
Yeah, but let's just pretend for a second we can get parts and we can get all this stuff, and we just give them the zone because of all that, without a development agreement, without vesting them in something specific. The very next day, the county can change the law that says,
We did this.
I'm glad you subdivided that land. However, it's now commercial property, and
That was then, this is now.
and so if you pull a permit today, you can't get one for a residence. It has to be for a commercial operation. Now, that's a little bit of an extreme, and some
Yeah.
attorneys would say if we do a residential subdivision, you need to allow residences even if you change that zone. But the principle's still there. Stagecoach. We had an issue with the ordinances that we just codified, the R1, 2, and 3 zones. Their development, the MacArthur Homes bought it under the assumption that their setbacks are 30 feet from the front, 10 feet on one side, 14 feet on the other side. They've got a product that they're selling based on those setbacks. And when we said 15 feet in the front, well, it's great for them, right? Except for there's only a certain amount of garage door that can face forward. Had that development been developed knowing that the code is only a certain length of garage door can face the street, they might have put some alleyways in. You know, they might have done something different. So to now pull the rug out from under MacArthur Homes to say, sorry, you can't provide the product that you bought this project for. You've got to completely redo it and turn all your houses around. It just seems a little unfair. Now we're working with them in a different way, but if you didn't have a development agreement and you were just governed by existing law, those laws can change out from under you. So this does still, even though it's slanted in favor of the county, it still gives you a level of predictability. Not the level of predictability most development agreements give. county still has the ability to make some changes.
I thought that it was whenever they made application, whatever the code was at that time is what they had to adhere to.
It's not exactly, and yes. So we actually had a good conversation, Liam, myself, and Cortland the other day about this. That section of code is pretty specific to administrative land use permits or land use applications, subdivisions, building permits, land use permits, that kind of stuff. If I apply to build a shed under these rules, the minute I put that application in, the rules to govern my shed are frozen. You can't change that on me. Through a development agreement and a rezone, we're not applying any kind of administrative rules yet. We're creating new rules. We're creating legislation. And so the vesting doctrine is a little bit different. What does a development agreement vest? It depends on what the agreement says. And this is, Cortland had to tell me that like 20 times yesterday. What gets vested? A lot of development agreements say things are, actually a lot of development agreements are developer heavy. And you'll find this in Jeff's development agreement, where it says the developer is vested in whatever the document says, understanding that there are other ordinances that they got to comply with, and those ordinances can change. It's whatever the document says, plus any ordinance in place that might affect what the document says. So if the document says I get to have 300 homes, and an ordinance goes in place on that property that now says, no, it's only 200 homes, they're vested with 300. But if the document doesn't say your setbacks are this, and the county changes the setbacks, then your setbacks are whatever the county changes them to. It's called preservation of legislative powers. And the state constitution is written in a way that bridles the ability for us to contract away the county commission's ability to create new laws. If it's good enough for the goose, it should be good enough for the gander. So if we're changing the setback rules for one, we should be changing it for all. Well, wait a second. This one was developed a very specific way, so maybe we shouldn't. So it depends on what the vesting says. I think what we've come to conclusion on in this document here is that the county will have control over whether or not a new law can be applied to that property. A lot of times these development agreements are written to say the developer has control. Developer, I'm vested in these rules unless I like the new rules that you're making. Then I get to opt into those new rules. But you can't apply them to me. That's what most development agreements essentially say under the vesting sections. What we're writing this to say is that you're vested in the rules, but if we change them, we get to apply them to you if it makes sense to apply them to you. Okay, and it's pretty strict, but it's still more predictable than just going without a development agreement. Mm-hmm. So they know they're vested in number of units, they're vested in other things that are specifically written in the document. So the way the vesting works for this document essentially is the county is entering this agreement based off of how we understand our rules right now. If the state changes the rules to say that we can't do certain things that our code says that we can do, but we gave a development agreement and a rezone because our code said that, well, they've completely undone the reason, or part of the reason, part of the consideration for creating the development agreement and giving the rezone. So much so that at some point, the state could undo things so much so that we would have never given that rezone in the first place had that been the case at the time. So county still wants to maintain some level of control over what new rules get applied. So we'll see some of that in here. The other stuff is, I haven't fleshed it out all the way out with Gary and his team, but it's infrastructure. There's a whole page about trees, I'm sorry. We can skip that one. But this will give you a good feel for how these development agreements go, so that when you're looking at some of these new ones that are coming through, you'll kind of see how that works. So with that in mind,
I still want to have to maintain them. I know there's a lot of them in my backyard that's 100 feet away. All you have to do in the fall is clean them up.
Tell my neighbor that.
Well, they're on your side of the fence, you clean them up.
He gets mad that my leaves fall on his yard, but it's
That's
okay.
what I mean.
It's okay when his branches fall on mine.
They're just a pain.
I came home one time and my driveway was full of leaves that were on his lawn.
You knew what it was.
It's a lot of effort. I like that neighbor.
Best part was the wind.
So you
the
guys
wind
aren't-
picked up and pushed
Exactly,
us
going to dinner with each other.
We're friends. So
like
it was.
Somebody that's that spiteful that would.
I think it was
So,
more of a joke, but-
are you saying this is generic for the 20 and 40 acres, and the selective ones, like this 4,000 home one that's coming,
Mhm.
is going to be drawn separate by you?
Yeah.
And the state does have the opportunity, if they come in with something that maybe you can't give away those rights that you did, you can change that to them.
Yes.
Written in here and in the generic.
That's
Okay,
right.
I got you.
That's exactly right.
How do you feel about that, Mr. I was a developer?
Amen.
Okay.
I think this is great. 'Cause you could come in and you could take a week reading this, and you know where you had to be to get so many houses.
For every new development you do.
We haven't had that.
Yeah. Well, and our desire when we were doing the general plan was to create ordinances that did this. But the further we got with, let's do all these public betterments for the community that's being impacted by all this new development, the further away from legalities we got if it was just straight through ordinance. So you probably won't hear us have a conversation about fee in lieu for parks going into the subdivision code. They'll all be done through this. Okay. Let's just browse through here. So recitals, that's not a big deal. Recital says this is why we're all doing what we're
Question,
doing.
just to protect us on something like that, are we better off to state whatever the Parks District recommends in here so that we're not bound? So it's the Parks District that's coming to the table, and their letter's one saying $7,500 a door, and that's attached to our development agreement, more so to try and keep the county out of hot water and us. It's what they're asking for. We're just following their recommendation. No different than what goes on with water and all those utilities.
Just becomes an attachment to the document.
So
in other words.
it doesn't change. Well, Liam can correct me if I'm wrong. It doesn't. If the county is using that as its justification to ask for a donation, it's still the county doing it. And so I don't think it changes the amount of risk that we run. What do you think, Liam?
No, I don't think it changes.
Okay. And so my recommendation, and one thing you're going to find in here, is that when it comes to parks, it's the county is asking for this, the county is asking for that, the county is asking for that. And the county has the right and authority. The developer won't protest when the county hands it over to the park district. That way, we still have control. So big regional park comes in that maybe the county wants to have some ownership over. North Fork Park out west. The county might want to do that, and because we are driving all of this, we've got the ability to do that. But I think for the most part, we all agree. The county doesn't have a big Parks and Rec department, and the Park District exists, so we'll probably hand them over to the Parks District pretty routinely. I haven't had this conversation with the Parks guys yet either, so don't spoil it. I'm going to have that meeting with them later. No, I think
You was looking right.
I know. Don't worry, I'm good.
No, I got to send it over to both Joe and Lance before we do finalize this.
Mention it at dinner tonight, tomorrow.
No, with Lance and Joe.
Yeah.
Nor over cocktails either. I don't care how drunk they get me.
All right, on page 4, agreement terms. Just prior to that, recitals.
Joe might.
All recitals do is says this is why we're at the table with creating a development agreement. It also helps us kind of put together the assertions or the purposes of what the consideration is going back and forth. What the developer gets versus what the county gets. Effective date, expiration, and termination. Expiration and zone reversion, 2.2. This is on page 4. Jeff's attorney, he's not the first one to say, we don't think you could do zone reversion. And the reason why the attorneys are saying you can't do zone reversion is because you are actually changing the land use map in the future without process. There's no due process given. So 10 years from now, let's say a zone reversion happens, no one who lives around there is going to receive a notice saying that that zone is changing. No one who lives around there is going to be able to come to a public hearing and protest or support. All of that happened 10 years prior. As we flesh this out, Liam, myself, and Cortland on this, we think we've got a way to try and protect ourselves here. My statement earlier still stands. If we can accomplish the exact same thing through overlay zones, if we could accomplish the exact same thing through sunset clauses, then why can't we do this? So I think that we have a pretty good argument on zone reversion, but we also have a catch-all in case it doesn't work. So when you look at this 2.2.1, if you look further closer to the end of that first paragraph, it starts with upon expiration. Upon expiration or termination of this agreement, the portion of the property that has not been developed as set forth in this agreement, including any parcel or portion of parcel that could be further developed, shall thereafter be governed as follows. 2.2.1.1, the rights and responsibilities set forth herein related to establishing new development on the property or establishing new uses on the property shall terminate, at which time the rights and responsibilities of the prior zone, we define what the prior zone is, it's just whatever was zoned from, shall govern so it shall govern any, essentially, remaining development or the establishment of new uses on the property. So in the event that we can't actually get zone reversion, maybe you keep the R115 zone, but you're doing all the uses and you're doing all the acreages and the sizing of the A1 zone. This can stand. This can last.
Why would we want reversion?
Because you're taking the density away because they're not fulfilling their responsibilities for the rest of the project. I'm not saying you always want.
Let's say there's 1,000 people that moved in.
Yeah.
And 1,000 people you promised something to.
So those 1,000 people, they moved in, their properties stay in the zone.
But they are sold the idea that it's going to run clear down. Why not leave it alone?
It's like Taylor Park.
Until somebody comes along with the right pocket.
Yeah, why can't you just leave it to the
Well, but some of that problem I see with that is you're going to have the developers are going to come in and with this lot averaging we're doing now, with it, they're going to come in and they're going to build all the small stuff here and then leave the rest of it till later. Well,
and the market falls out of the bottom.
Right.
They don't finish the rest. They get all the benefit.
I know, but I didn't think we could do that. I thought it had to be done in I'm going to say contiguous way.
So
front to back, and the small's not all going to be in one spot through this. It's going to be scattered.
it could be. So let's just say Stagecoach. Their inner lots are 6,000 square foot lots. Their outer lots are bigger lots. Correct. If they started in the middle, built a road to it, and then started with those 6,000 square foot lots, and then left the rest of it, they lost the note on the property or foreclosed or default, whatever it is.
I see that point. It's a good point. Okay, I'm with you.
But to your point, the good thing that we got going, and hopefully it's in here, is they have to put in that comparable amount of open space for each phase they're doing at that time, so we don't run into the Taylor Landings and Sunset Equestrian and that, so that those amenities go, just like what JDC's doing, that for every 100 doors or whatever it is, or 100 permits, they got to put in X amount of improvements,
and they actually were ahead of that game.
Yeah, they are, but that's what I feel protects, because in my opinion, more people are buying into that stuff for the amenities, not for what the future development's going to be in it.
But I think there's an expectation for what the future development's going to be.
There could be, but if you're going to, no one's going to, well, maybe someone will, but most people, the people we hear from, aren't going to complain if it goes back to a larger lot scenario.
I agree with you. And on the flip side, there's a 10-year term on the agreement. I'm in year 9. I'm the developer. I'm in year 9. And all I got to do is wait one more year. The agreement expires, and I keep the zone. Now, I've only developed half the property up to that point. All right, 10 years quick. I keep the zone with none of the obligation to donate to the park district with every new plat that I put down, none of the obligation to put in the trails and the street connectivity. Actually, our codes are pretty good in that respect, so we can get that. But anything that we got above and beyond through the development agreement goes away.
And that's the part that I don't like. I want that development agreement, no matter who the owner is, to run with that ground.
Well, but if it expires, they got to come back in.
They got to do it all over
and start over. So then we have that opportunity
if they want it.
Or they can go for 1 acre lots.
Yeah,
and
I'm with you though. I think if you're promised an amenity, it should be put in eventually by no matter who.
And
maybe we could come up with a percentage of this is how many of those small homes you can do per big lot.
We could certainly do that.
And I think that's better, because then whatever you promise the people down the road happens in the future.
Yeah. Let me give you a story of a development that I've dealt with in the past. It was a 9-phase development, golf course, recreation, resort, amenity. Golf course was in phases 7, 8, and 9. Actually, I might have already told you guys this story.
I've never heard it.
And they finished phase 1, 2, and 3. And then 2008, market dropped out the bottom. They circled their wagons.
Democrat was in.
They could
Interest went through the roof. I can't afford food.
They stopped.
Oh, I can't say, I'm in Weaver County, I can say that.
They circled their wagons. They stopped fulfilling their responsibilities in the development agreement. Half the sidewalks that were supposed to be in the development weren't there. The other half were cracked and broken because they just didn't do it right. And so the county declared them in default after phase 3. Not this county, different county. As time went on, they slowly worked their way out of default. We worked with them, and they were able to get things progressed again. Turns out the development agreement was not signed by the landowner who owned phases 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. They had some kind of a joint venture going on. Nope. Now, this was a mistake that the county made. We won't make this mistake. But in that scenario, they got phases 1 through, they ended up getting phase 4 of the resort community, no golf course, no open space, no amenities, no clubhouse, and they walked away with that. Now, we're trying to fix that by saying, if your whole thing is based on a golf course, every home you put in, you got to put in a percentage of the golf course, right? So we're trying to fix it that way, but we're not going to be able to foolproof it. At some point in time, you're going to have half a project done, and the developer's going to go bust. And if you don't take away the developer's consideration for that, the reason they got that density, if you don't take away the density, they're just going to use that density to their benefit. They'll sell it to the next highest bidder that has zero obligation to fulfill those other responsibilities. So that's why reversion is important.
So one more question. So when we see this, a map of what they're going to do out there, large lots, small lots, they have the opportunity themselves to move all the small ones to the front?
So one of the things that we've been doing...
That doesn't sound right.
You'll see it next week when Navy Meadows makes their
application.
Proposal.
Yeah. So one of the things we've been doing is we've been saying what's really important to us. What's really important is street connectivity, trails, and open space. Show us your concept plan that has street connectivity, trails, and open space. You can have the R115 zone. In the R115 zone, it says you can have lots as small as 6,000 square feet as long as your overall acreage has no more density than overall acreage divided by
500 homes or whatever. But
So-
they can move it even after they get approved.
Well, so I think even on that one, they took lot lines off. I've been encouraging them to take lot lines off because it allows them a lot of flexibility later on to put the lots in a configuration that the market is asking for. But it also, to the
I
concerns
think they ought to have to leave it alone personally.
and we could do that. In fact, another thing that we
They
could
show
do,
us a concept. I mean, they don't have to know what they're going to build, but the size of the lot should stay the same.
Okay.
So they know what they're buying.
The
into.
density.
Density's fine, but the size of the lots too, around the perimeter.
Yep. So if that is an important consideration, it is definitely something that we will need to get in their concept plan. And we wouldn't need to change any of this. Just in the concept plan, if it shows a specific lot configuration, we'll just make sure that that lot configuration is what they provide us. The ones that have been coming through the system, we haven't been as concerned about that lot configuration. We've been saying, look, with each phase, with each plat, it's not a give us the proportionate percentage of open space per acre of lot that you build. It's give us a proportionate percent of open space per dwelling unit lot that you create. So even if you do the small ones, you're still giving the equitable amount of open space. So does that make sense on the
And who
expiration?
polices that?
We do it through development applications.
Okay.
So they'll submit, like, like Brent said, they'll submit their subdivision application. They'll show how it's all chopped up. We go in, we count the numbers, verify that they're not over their amount. But if they front end, if they're phasing and they front end all the small lots up front, then when they bring in phase 2, we're going to need to make sure that some of those lots are bigger. Or maybe it's all the lots are smaller and then the very last one is a mansion estate lot that's 30 acres. They won't be able to get to that final. Part of it's a benefit to the county to have them plat all the small ones up front, because that's a larger amount of acreage with larger and larger lot sizes on the back end that could be open space if it's not platted. So you know what you're getting right up front. You're getting the open space out of it. You're getting the parks. You're getting the trails and the streets. And then if they plat it all up front and they only have enough density left over for one 30-acre lot, you know what you get. So I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. It's predictable that way. And one thing's predictable is you can always expect the developer to do what's in their best interest.
They have to. It's all market driven.
Yep.
But you can kind of control that if you don't let them run away with the other. They can market the big with the same time.
I agree. And on those developments that you feel like that's important, let's make sure that gets captured in a development agreement. So hopefully the ones that we've done so far there's not a big problem with those. But we'll see.
We'll see what they do. As big as they are, we might not live that long.
Okay, 2.2.1.1 on phase 4, just the next paragraph down. That's the one that is the zone reversion. So basically what we're saying here with 1.1 and 1.2, we're double dutying. We're saying in the event his attorney is right, you can't do a zone reversion. At the very least, 1.1 prevails, and the regulations that apply in a prior zone are there, even though we're not changing the zone. It's actually one of the reasons why I think a court would say this is just fine to do it this way, because if we could still do it, we're just changing the way we're saying we're doing it. A duck's still a duck, right?
His attorney's not right.
I'm with you. And our attorneys will win on that.
Well, I just don't like this argument he brings up about it binding a future legislative body, because we aren't binding them. They still have the ability to rezone it to whatever they want.
Ask for a change, right?
Right.
Yep.
They can still change.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not stuck there. Come back with a proposal.
Right.
Run it through the process.
We saw that in the Ogden Valley. There was a commercial rezone that happened. It happened from a forest zone to a commercial zone. The development agreement said zone reversion happens at a certain period of time. We got 15 years past that period of time. Nobody knew this development agreement existed, and all of a sudden it surfaced as they were trying to do something else. And so we went to the county commission. We said, okay, we're supposed to go back to the forest zone, but do you guys really want to do that? And they said, no, let's go to the residential zone that they're asking for. So I agree with Liam. This doesn't change the county commission's authority, your guys' authority to make those decisions. Okay, the next few pages, these are all definitions. I haven't yet defined what public park open space is, but I do use those 4 words in sequence in the document, so we'll get down to that on page 8. So page 9, vesting and reserved legislative powers. Oh, sorry. Let's look at conflicting provision. What this paragraph on page 8 says is, if anything in the exhibits to the agreement and the agreement conflict with each other, the written text prevails. If anything in the exhibits conflict with other exhibits, the more restrictive on the developer prevails. One of the other things you'll find in another paragraph, it says, in the event the developer doesn't provide the information that is required on their concept plan, which Exhibit C has instructions on minimum concept plan requirements. If they fail to include one of these things, the county has full authority to decide what's there. So if they don't say this type of street is a collector street, they just leave it blank, then we get to decide what kind of street that is later on. They forfeit the opportunity to choose their own destiny there. That way, if there is any errors of omission by the developer, it's not coming back on us. Because remember, when we're looking at land use stuff, land use law is in derogation of property rights. If there's any ambiguity or conflict or ability to read it a different way, we have to find in favor of the landowner, the developer. Well, what if that creates a problem that, had we known it existed, would have stopped us from even rezoning the property in the first place? So through contract, we can change that. We can say, sorry, the county has the ability to say, if you left stuff out, what that thing is. Okay. That's conflicting provisions. The other part of that is if there's anything that conflicts in the development agreement and the county code, what's in the development agreement prevails. And that's where the vesting comes in. So if the code says you can only do 2, the development agreement says you can do 300, the 300 prevails. Okay. Vested rights and reserved legislative powers. I was lamenting to Liam and Cortland yesterday. I'm not quite sure how I want to put you guys through this, or even if I want to. Maybe we talked enough about it.
Charlie, is this something we're going to be voting on next week? Or
No.
something quick? Okay.
No, in fact, I don't even know if we're going to vote on this. I just want to work with you guys on it and work with the county commissioners. If it gets to a point you guys want to take a vote on it, we can do that. But it could
I
just
think
be
this is administrative. This is,
well,
I appreciate
the inclusion, yeah.
but I think this is something we typically don't vote on them anyways.
I was just wondering if there's like a timeline we needed to
No.
understand it all.
We do have
So,
3 developments that are waiting.
On
We've
both
put
sides.
all of Heritage, all of Phil Holland, all of Pat's projects on hold until we have a standardized agreement. Now that we know we want to do something like this, we don't want to approve a single other development agreement which sucks because I wrote Heritage's development agreement already. They've already seen it, and now we're going to pull the rug out from under them. But I agree with that. Okay, vested rights basically says the developer gets whatever the R115, if it's R115 zone says. So if we go and we change the R115 zone later, anything that was in the R115 zone at the time the development agreement was recorded is what applies to the project. So that will stay. We can't go change setbacks. We can't go change land uses on that developer. The developer is vested in that. So that solves the MacArthur Homes issue in Stagecoach. But the subdivision code, they're not vested in the subdivision code. So if we change subdivision standards, they might have to change the way they do their subdivisions, which is important. It's important that we can change the laws, because if we're changing them for a reason, right? But if it changes it in a way that really affects a developer's ability to do what they want to do and the reason why they bought the property, the county has full authority to waive it and just stick with this. Okay, that's basically existing laws. That paragraph, we're probably gonna soften or pull out, because we're trying to figure out what do we want to vest them in and what do we want to guarantee that the county gets. It's a lot easier for us to say Title 104, 108, 106, stay with the property forever until this agreement expires or full build out happens. Very predictable. However, stops us from adopting any new law. So we're going to soften this a little bit to say when it benefits the county, these ordinances apply. When it doesn't benefit the county and we create a new law, the new laws apply. Unless it negatively affects what was in the R115 zone. So unless it negatively affects 5.1. So that would be the only way that we can't apply those new laws.
And that's paragraph 5.2 you're talking about?
Yep, 5.2. And so we'll write that a little bit differently. Exceptions to vested rights. There are exceptions to the rules. One of the most important ones is, let's say we got the R115 zone, there's something in there that turns out to be a safety hazard. The county has the right under state law to declare a compelling countervailing public interest. And if that happens, it's a high standard to meet, but if that happens, we can change a law that they're vested in. But other than that, we wouldn't be able to change one. Okay.
Unless we could think of a good reason to.
Right. Okay. Future laws. This is one that I don't know. Pat myself on the back for this. Cortland and Liam, through our different conversations, have caused me to do some mental acrobatics, and this is what I came up with. Future laws. The parties agree that this agreement and the associated rezone offers mutual benefits based on existing laws. As such, a future law or binding judicial decision that limits or interferes with the master developer's material responsibilities herein could herein could prevent the county from realizing such expected benefits in a manner that, had the future law or binding judicial decision existed at the time of consideration, might have dissuaded the county from executing this agreement or granting the associated rezone. Therefore, the parties agree that if a future law is implemented or binding judicial decision is issued that gives master developer the right or ability to avoid, limit, or interfere with any responsibility specified in this agreement, master developer hereby, by signing this agreement, waives the new right or ability in favor of maintaining the applicability and integrity of this agreement. In the event the new right or ability is such that the master developer's waiver still limits or interferes with the responsibilities of the responsibility or applicability thereof, then this agreement automatically terminates as provided in that termination section that we already read, which triggers zone reversion. However, the termination shall be void, and both parties shall proceed as if no termination occurred if the county agrees otherwise. So that's where we say, you know what? All right, if the legislature is going to say we can't require street trees, well, we're done. We're rolling up the carpet.
Did they?
No, but I should have chosen something else. I thought that would be funnier than it was. But
I'll bet they did, and you're not telling us.
But they did say that if the county is not maintaining those trees, then we can't require a financial security for it. We can't require a bond.
That's another thing with requiring trees. That 23-year-old kid that's going to buy a house has to pay for it.
Yeah,
that developer's
it
not giving him nothing.
Yep, I agree. It costs. It costs more. And we'll go over some of those street tree things in here. We'll probably have to do that next week.
Oh, I think everybody here likes trees, so you just do what you want.
We'll just close our eyes.
As long as they're not by the river.
Or the park strip.
Or in the park strip. In the river.
One of the biggest issues with trees, aside from expense, that you guys are all aware of, is they wreak havoc on infrastructure.
They do.
Street sweepers, snow plows, sidewalks,
foundations,
septic tanks.
Septic. Well,
yeah,
sewer laterals.
Boy.
If we have provisions, at the very least, provisions in the agreement and otherwise adopted by statute that says, at the very least, save your park strip, save your sidewalk, and save your curb and gutter by planting the right tree with the right park strip width. If you want to put elms in or you want to put sycamores in, you better have a lot more park strip width. So we can try and help avoid a lot of that. The leaves is a different story. We're probably going to have to invest in a street sweeper at some point in time.
We got one.
But root issues, Gary and I have put our heads together because that was his biggest issue. And the reason why he has a big issue with it is because his department has to budget every time they have to replace the sidewalk or the curb. It's not a different department. So he's watching that fund drain every time a tree falls over and takes the sidewalk with it. But if we
just grows up through it.
Like my sycamore is doing. I get some really great puddles out in front of my house. Okay. Let's see, where are we? Let's see, project description, future laws. Okay. Page 11, section 8, development standards. This is the meat and potatoes. I mean, all this other stuff, this is the kind of legalese that we say isn't normally a land use law, but you can see how it benefits you to look at that and get a good understanding of how it works. Development standards, this is all land use. Project density, that's what they're vested in. That's 8.1. 8.2, phasing, we're basically saying you can phase it however you want to as long as your amenities are put in commensurate to the ratio of units. So if you have 100 units, you put 10 lots in, you have to do 10% of your open space, 10% of your trails, 10% of that other stuff. And also you can't create a dead-end road. You've got to create loops after, what do we say, 15 homes. So the county code says 15. So. Street connectivity, we're basically saying that they volunteer to follow the street connectivity code. The only reason why we need to say something like that in a development agreement like this is if something happens in the future and that code has to be changed or is held invalid by the legislature. Which reminds me, the substandard road right-of-way. I got that in here too. So in the event that there is some legal issue that we can't apply it, it'll be here that they've agreed to actually using that and enforcing it. 8.4, so the way that these work with improvements and dedication is you'll have a section about dedication, and then you'll have the next section down is going to be about improvements. So street right-of-way, again, all the black line is intended to stay as much as possible. Master developer agrees to dedicate or, if allowed by the county, otherwise reserve the project's street rights-of-way as illustrated and labeled in Exhibit C as public thoroughfares at no cost to the county. Minimum requirement, 8.4.1, each street right-of-way shall meet the minimum applicable width specification illustrated in Exhibit E. That's going to be the street cross sections. And then 8.4.2, anything special about street rights-of-way for that project, about street right-of-way dedication. Okay. This might be the one where they say, all this stuff notwithstanding, all of our park strips have to be 300 feet wide so we could put the biggest tree possible in there. Don't stop joking about trees, it's landed flat.
That should be wide enough.
Okay, so 8.5 is the sister paragraph to 8.4. This is the street improvements. Reason why we keep them separate like that rather than bundling together is in some cases we're just going to want dedication. We're not going to want that street to be installed. In fact, we did that on Windmill number 2. There's that little piece on the very eastern edge that we want them to hold as a street right-of-way, but we're not going to require them to put anything in it. That just helps the landowner to the south connect to it. And then street improvements. These are the kinds of improvements that you need. I couldn't think of anything that would be generic for street improvements. I think everything is going to be pretty project specific.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to need to call it out based on the type of street and what's already there. Okay, moving on. Sidewalks. Our current code says if you do a pathway on one side, you can do a 4-foot sidewalk on the other side. My recommendation is let's just do 5-foot sidewalks regardless of whether or not there's a pathway over here. Just keep it standard. That way the people on that side of the road still have the benefit of having a little bit wider sidewalk. Driveway accesses, we got that in code. We're just going to make that applicable here. Street fencing. Street fencing along collector or arterial streets. This is something that we tried to flesh out with Winston Park. And basically it says you need to create a fence that looks really pretty, and pretty is done this way. And some examples of what pretty is on exhibit. Oh, it's supposed to be G. Sorry. G. So if you look at the very last page, these are pretty fences, and all these fences would comply with what's written there. The only caveat is if there's already a fence along that street corridor within a certain distance, they got to match that fence. We don't want changing fences all the way down.
I was getting it. I was getting this.
Okay, I'm going to skip 8.5.6 for good reason.
Looks a little bit better on the top.
We don't need to. Yeah.
Fly out by.
The only additional thing that I would tell you guys that you haven't already had a conversation about is one of the things we're asking of the developer is get us something in writing from a professional landscape architect or an arborist, somebody who has a 4-year degree in tree health. Tell us that it was planted correctly and that you're following best practices. So
That's just more money to the kids.
Yep.
it is. A lot of this is going to be.
There's too much regulation.
So that's where I want to, when we get to the end of this, that's where I want the policy conversation to have. I want us to talk about whether or not we should be going to this extent.
No.
Or should we do like Sean would like us to do and just say, if your general plan says R115, you're in the R115. If we don't get parks out of you, we don't get parks out of you.
No, I like this better.
Okay. Well,
But I agree with.
we'll keep going. You may continue to not like it, or you may decide to not
Well,
like it.
I mean, if you're going to spend like $30,000 extra up front, who does that go to?
Yeah, all that gets. I mean, the developer's going to want to make their margins, and so it's just going to go. Someone's going to have to pay.
Why would he not want to make it more?
Some of these,
Why
to
do
me,
it?
Yeah, so
They're
that,
important, some of them aren't.
that's the other side of it is, if we're doing it like this, are we going to have developers saying we're not doing this? We're fine. We're not developing in Weber County. Now, Joe Giordano will say, good.
He's happy.
Right.
I don't blame him.
And I think a lot of people would say that. Give us the Cadillac version of development.
Except
We
for
want-
the property owner.
Except
But
for
we don't need to price the houses out of the kids
Right.
in
I
the
agree.
first place, and that's what these little regulations do.
Yeah.
Pretty
Actually,
soon they just go like, I'm done.
let me put,
I think I'll go up to Brigham City and build.
yeah, where it's easier.
Well, I mean, and
Less.
some of it is just the.
If it was easier, you'd see development booming up there.
It is. They're starting to rock and roll.
In a few spots, that's about the only spot in
Well, that's it.
Brigham City and Tremont.
Yeah.
This
Everywhere
applies to
else
every
is-
developer, whether you're somebody that's got, like me, that's got 3 acres and wants to put one house on it. I'm still gonna have to follow all this. You tell me to go get somebody that has a degree in arborist to do a tree.
Yeah,
you
you
know, I'm
probably-
gonna be like, Charlie, you can.
You've got 3 acres, you wouldn't
somebody
have to
at
do
college,
this.
so
But still, it's
you've got an advantage on us.
Yeah, for me, but somebody else that doesn't.
know.
You know,
It
it's
just
just
gets too
it's
complicated.
too much.
So
I agree. as
So
far as that
there's
stuff
there's
goes.
there's 2 ways that we can do this, and this actually
Just take
does
the
it.
trees out.
This does it. 3 ways we can do this. This does it the first 2 ways. It says, give us a professional, the same way that we would do it with the streets. Give us a professional's opinion that you did it right. That way, because our guys
Let's
are,
just pray about
we
it.
might cork. We could do that too.
That's the fourth.
Please bless everything too.
Whatever the mechanic comes up with. If you like him, it's all right.
Every tree, Russian holly.
I like it. It'll grow.
It will
won't
grow.
die.
And no water.
I'll guarantee you the kids will leave it alone too.
Yeah.
Yeah. You won't have
And you don't even need a fence.
You're me,
You got
breather
mouth
out
bubble.
Yeah.
The other side of this with the trees, and this is the double-sided angle that this actually takes both sides of that edge. It says, give us an expert review of the installation of these trees so we can verify they were done correctly. And then it says, master developer stays in charge of those trees even after the warranty period ends until they sell the neighboring property. So, and essentially that would be how our code works anyway, because the neighboring property owner should be or is responsible for that tree. But
Charlie, I love trees. This is a lot of damn language for trees. Like
trees are the biggest
all
challenge for
respect,
developers.
I know. But
It's not just the trees, it's all the small stuff.
it's like our 3-month conversation on lighting that we had.
Flooding, I understand.
I get it, but it's just like, what does it get us in
Yep.
the end?
Come on over to my house.
I know I
Come on
get that
over.
part, but I'm saying like some of this is.
And I got ones behind me doing the same thing, and they're half a mile away.
But that lighting, that's a small cost compared to some.
And there's
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
how
yeah.
far away you can see.
Small
Yeah.
cost.
Yeah.
Okay.
We set up.
So they are those we.
So that's public landscaping. Private landscaping, non-public landscaping to be water-wise, that's 8.6. We're just saying smart water controller. I still don't know if the commissioners are going to continue to buy into that. They kind of backed off from the smart thermostat. They said, I don't know if we want to say, let's do that. And it's this conversation. Is it too much? And I'm just here to help you try and get your general plan done. I'm not here to tell you whether or not it's the correct policy decision, because
What do you mean, water-wise? What are you talking about?
Well, so for water-wise here, what we're saying is before C of O is going to be issued on a home, there needs to be a smart water controller installed. And then we explain what installed means. They don't have to put in the valves. They
There's
don't have to
another
wire it.
regulation.
Mhm.
Most of those yards aren't going to go in for 2 years unless you put them in.
I agree. So the requirement would not be to put the sprinkler system in. It's just put the smart controller in, plug it in.
It
That's all.
becomes invalid in 2 years when something else comes out. You'd rather have that.
That's accurate as well.
I'm going to rewrite this for you.
Okay. Let's see. Lot landscape plan. This is the one that we really, I don't know if it's necessary. We're not enforcing.
Get rid of that too.
So when we ask, what this does is it says when you ask for a building permit, you need to give us a lot landscape plan. Most people don't know.
That's really, and I'm
landscape
I'm
plan?
trying to be over outspoken here. I sound obnoxious, but these are stupid things to require on a new house.
We've
If you
talked-
want to maintain affordability,
Yeah.
now the only people that control that are the people like in a homeowners association.
Yep.
And that's what we've done with these big areas.
Yep.
But if you're talking about doing a house here and a house there,
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about putting maybe $50,000 on top of a person's house
Yeah.
for nothing.
In addition to that, one of the
I can see a lot. I can see a bigger driveway. I could see a hot tub out back. I can see a lot more useful things than telling them that they should submit their landscaping plan 2 years before they do it.
I agree with you on that.
Okay.
I also agree that the county shouldn't.
Did you show these to Gage and he agreed to them?
Not yet.
Okay.
No. This is all just
Tell
kind
him
of
my feelings.
kind of a baseline. Yeah. The hard part with this is what is the county going to do with the landscape plan? The only reason it would be in here, it would be to encourage the applicant to be aware of what smart landscaping is or what water-wise landscaping is.
County
That
don't have
would
the
be only
staffing
thing.
moving forward to review
We don't have
landscape
this-
Yeah,
plans.
so
We don't
don't
have
require it.
staffing.
If we can't do anything about it, don't require it.
Okay, it's out.
Okay.
Utilities. We're saying bury your overhead utility lines. Sanitary sewer.
I agree with that one.
Okay.
Safer.
Okay, good. Sanitary sewer, either 8.7.2.1 is either the county is going to provide some collection service or we're not, right? So 2.1 is for the developments that we're not providing collection service. That's on the west side of the river. 2.2 is for the developments that we are providing collection service. Any of these can be, you can see from my notes on the side, if it's not applicable, the word omitted goes right into that paragraph. It keeps the numbering the same. Sewer treatment, basically saying the county is not in the business of sewer treatment. We won't be in the business of sewer treatment. Developer needs to figure that out. And if it requires them to annex into a sewer treatment district prior to their development, they need to do that. So just make sure the developer is on notice.
Reasonable.
I don't want them to come back and say, "You,
I don't have a sewer."
you approved this."
I don't mind that.
Okay. System requirements, basically, this is for the sewer system. Master developer agrees to install or cause to be installed a sewer collection system. That's 8.7.2.4.1. 4.2 and 4.3 below is if we're requiring them to install a lift station as well. Okay. And actually, I'm going to put a 4.4 underneath that. That one will be reserved for potential payback agreements because some developers definitely should get that if they're oversizing their sewer facilities.
Yeah, through a pioneering agreement, not through a public infrastructure district.
That's actually a good point. We're not going to be putting anything public infrastructure district in development agreements. So pioneering, all that kind of stuff will still be available. If they want to do a PID, they can still try and go through that process, but we're not going to say anything about it. Culinary secondary water, we're basically saying what the code already says there. Stormwater, basically saying what the code already says there. 8.8, parks and open space. Now this is kind of the thing that makes the community that Cadillac, but it's also pretty nitpicky. So I'm not going to read it all to you, but when you get time, when you go home, read through it. 8.8.1, that's a donation. That's just the donation. If it's purely donation, 8.8.2 and below do not apply. But maybe they do a $2,500 donation instead of $7,500 and they provide a park. Yeah, so we can negotiate that and change the 75 to something else.
That's no different than what we've been doing, so we're good.
Also, I did write $7,500 based on 2024 dollars. So in 2026, it'll be based on add inflation into that, essentially. So the number won't stay the same. 8.2, if they're going to dedicate and convey and create a park, you've got 8.2 park dedication. It's the method. That's how you do it. It's the possibility to allow deferred conveyance in certain circumstances that would be omitted if we're not allowing deferred conveyance. But kind of like we talked about tonight. Actually, we didn't talk about that. What Black Pine's thinking about is along that river corridor and on some of their open spaces, while they're not building, they still want to be able to farm it. that's a great way to keep that thing maintained.
Mhm.
So they said, we want it to be counted as our open space, our public open space, but we want to be able to farm it until our development gets up there. This is a great way that we can defer your actual dedication of that.
As long as it ties into, where did I see it? Anyways, as long as it goes in, they're still putting in what's needed for what they're developing.
Yep. Proportionate share. So we've got proportionate share of dedication. You shall dedicate proportionately per plat. And then we got proportionate share installation. You shall install proportionate per plat. Let's go to that installation. That's 8.8.3.
No, you're not jumping over 8.8.2.6.
Yep.
Just looking at that.
Let's go back there.
I'm drowning here because we've talked it so much, but I don't like that in. I think, yeah, this 300-foot hard line along there, something different's got to be put there.
It's so unique. It's so site specific that if you don't take the blanket, you're going to be having these kinds of long conversations about what is and what isn't and what should and what shouldn't be.
Well, we go back to what it used to be.
100. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if 100's right though either.
Well,
I think a lot of it depends on where you're at.
Exactly.
For the reason.
You know, and to
right?
me,
So it's going to come in front of the Planning Commission before that even gets, before the process even gets to that 300 feet.
Yep.
So at the time, so maybe what we do is we'd have the discussion about what that is on each development, and that number adjusts on each one of these maps, even though we're using boilerplate documentation here, which is great. I'm in favor of it. But that number could be adjusted site specific.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm writing variable right next to it.
I've got a question there. You know, I agree with all this, but to me, is there really an expert on this kind of thing? Really?
It's not at the end of the day, because it's like the conversation I had earlier today with Gary about this.
So
it's going to happen. What's going to happen is going to happen, and there's going to be a 50s. You know what happened in the 50s? It's going to be what happened in the 80s, and it's going to happen, and there's going to be nothing we can do about it.
What happened in 17?
You know,
what happened in 21? Every time's a little different. I'll still stand by what I
like
said.
the variable
50%
think of, was it 06 when the Virgin did what it did and all them houses in Washington County? Who would have ever thought that they would have ended up in the river?
That was
But
determined by.
That's it.
They did.
They did.
Right.
We can't protect it all, and at some point something's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I mean, hell, God forbid what happens when the dam breaks at Pineview, and what's that going to do to us all down here?
Yeah.
They were never considered any of that along the Ogden River there, but there ain't going to be nothing through the mouth of that canyon.
No.
But it's all stuff we can't control.
No, that school down there.
Pound out
be
after
gone.
that, though, Brad.
You'll get 6 inches of water everywhere instead of 10 feet of water everywhere.
30.
But what washes away, you know?
By the time it gets out there,
Should we not build in the mouth of a canyon because the dam could break and all that's going to wash away?
50% of what's going to happen on that river is still predictable. I'll stand by that 100%, because 50% of that of what happens with that river is caused by not maintaining that river.
I'll bet it's more like 80.
I'm being conservative. I'm being
Or
nice.
a good plan on
Those trees
managing
that
the
you're
water
talking
from the
about in there.
reservoirs.
That
They had
and how much they're letting out on the bottom.
I agree. I agree.
So the variable on that 300 feet or anything else that's above that under 8.8.2 would come in 8.8.2.8. And under that, it's the project-specific parks and open space dedication. What we would do there is we would say, despite what's written in 8.8.2.6, this project doesn't have to do 300 feet. They can do whatever's unique there.
So that gives us the ability to negotiate it, though.
Yeah.
So we can, yes, we can take 300 out. Your code says 300. And so
that got snuck in back in 2013, 2023.
Give yourself the option.
I had no idea when it got put in code.
Yeah.
At some point it came through us, and
It got snuck through us.
It didn't get snuck.
It did too.
You guys talked about it.
I don't remember one conversation about that. And I looked like a fool in a meeting when I said, "Where's the ordinance?" Well, you approved it. Well,
I didn't want to say that it got adopted, and then Sharon's like, "Wait, no, it's approved. It's sitting right in front of me."
You were the chair, remember?
No kidding. I think 2023 it was Andrew's. Maybe it was his fault.
That's the only time you went to sleep.
Yeah.
All right, here we get a little nitpicky on minimum park improvements required. Again,
Put
trying
down
to
your notes to take it out.
Well, I like it though if it's negotiable.
Right.
Because it gives us a starting point.
Which part?
No, but it's
300
not
or
our
the
ordinance.
No, I like the 300.
But it does give you the option down below.
But if it gives us, just like with Black Pine, we could come in and be hard-lined and say, no, ordinance says this is what it's going to be. But if we're getting some of those amenities and some of that other stuff, that's the negotiation to lessen that in some areas. And some of those areas, just like depending on what the studies say, they might need to be further than that. So that's that
300 feet of
that give and
property
take.
that nobody's going to take care of. Period.
If through that process, the first thing that is, if they can prove safety, they run it through engineering and they do what they're, and I'm talking about any developer.
Yeah.
If they run it through that and that's good, and then we get the amenities on top of that,
Yep.
it's all bonus.
I see.
Yeah.
I'm kind of hoping that they agree to do a large regional park, 20 acres or something like that. Give them the 100-foot. They get the benefit. We get the benefit.
And turn it over to,
The park district.
I'll bet they'd be happy to do
they
that,
keep-
because then they don't have the maintenance.
Not yet. But they keep all of their other open spaces. It's all publicly accessible, private open space. They have the river corridor that's 100 feet, and the community gets a really cool park.
He's still trying to negotiate that half-acre park in as part of the
Well, he would
open
get credit for that part, though.
They should.
So,
You would. So that's
what's the difference of it? Why would they want to maintain that?
part of the, sorry, sidetrack. Part of their concern, and in the beginning I didn't think it was a genuine concern. I believe them now. Part of their concern is that the park district won't maintain it in a way that creates a beautiful community for their project.
I was wondering about that.
Yep.
Sitting here.
They,
Look at what the park. Look at the park district's
If they
reputation.
mow it, what do you need?
Look at the park district's reputation. Look at 1800 South, right there by Gene Ropolato's old house.
Got a beautiful parking lot.
Yeah, and weeds that if you go in there, you can get lost.
I can't see that happening.
Yeah, but like if they're gonna have some of those parks though, they'll have an HOA, right? They don't, I mean, somebody's gotta maintain some of that too, right? And then have the Parks District maintain the big stuff.
Yeah, so the park district would only maintain the big stuff. They would do all the little stuff. Their HOA would do the little stuff. I don't know who would do the 100-foot corridor, but one thing I did tell Jeff is, hey, it's probably going to be your HOA, even if it's donated to the park district, along that corridor.
Yeah.
So maybe the HOA has to run a blade around on that 20-acre park until the park district can actually get there and plant some grass and put some trailheads in. Or if you're hard-nosed, the developer puts in a parking lot, a bathroom, a playground, and grass and a sprinkler system. And then the park district takes it, which...
Along the 100-foot?
Not in the not in the 100-foot, in their 20-acre or whatever that piece is.
Okay.
100-foot goes to a 20-acre, which then goes to a bunch of little pieces that. So it's still part of the Emerald Necklace. There's just one larger, I hope, central meeting place.
I think that
We got faith in you, Gary.
Well, I haven't been able to get them to agree to it yet, and that's one of the reasons why I want to continue to hold out.
Just have them put some contingencies back on you guys. If they don't maintain it, their standards, then
It's the
we have to
timing.
revert.
Yep,
We
it would.
want that up
So
front.
that's what I'm trying to get
Then
from
they
them.
might be willing to put the money out.
I would think they might have it from them.
We'll see.
One
For
less
sales, yeah.
Don't look good, take it back and do it like you like.
And actually, that's one thing I did mention. We can write your development agreement to say, if it does go to pot real quickly, it goes back to you.
And then you put that on your thing, Ren, that we take this 300 feet out of here in the ordinances that you put in.
The ordinance that I put in?
Yeah.
No, it was Andy. He was the chair at the time.
We're all
Liam? It was Liam.
Yeah, it came at
But
about
it can be
8:45.
negotiable as it goes through the process. That's what we want. And that's what
I, for the life of me, cannot
8.2.8
remember
explains,
any
right?
discussion about
Really,
it.
what we
can't
should
ever
do is we
remember
should do the general plan, change that, get into the
I
ordinance,
remember
change
talking
that.
about it in the general
And-
plan.
We
I
can
never
We don't
remember
have
going
time.
through it.
Yeah,
We do have time.
I just
I
feel like
kinda
it was
I
probably one
agree.
of these nights
In
it was
fact,
quarter to
next
9 and we
time
were like,
the
okay,
ordinance-
sounds
Let's blame it on
good.
Great
Which-
Bell.
Yep.
Might be with this project.
There you go.
We could probably slip over in there and do a real slip in,
passed.
but this time
Can you do
tell
that?
everyone Mr. Bren Reed.
I'd like to video that
Whoever
and
gets
put
the
that
wheel
out
of
on
the
social
weight,
media.
You can lead a horse to water. You cannot make him drink.
Yeah, true.
Tired of it.
along.
So I'll let you guys read through the rest of this on your own. Parks, trails, that kind of stuff. That's where the meat and potatoes are for that Cadillac version of a community.
So are we gonna find anything in here like this 300 feet?
Probably. Even if
We're
300
gonna
was
we're gonna find some in here like, oh, they also
Street
have to
trees?
provide 3 types of antennas, even if they don't want TV.
satellites.
Yeah,
Well, we got
what's that one that Musk has?
Starlink.
We gotta have Starlink.
Everything's got to
too.
start.
Starlink works
Provide
great.
phone with Starlink.
I'm writing that down, right?
I know, there's just too much.
I got Starlink on my trailer when I travel. I love it.
Stop.
First your bubble, but it's on.
We only got one bathroom.
It starts with a tree.
Gender not
It should cost you
specific.
$300.
There you go.
And it's gonna drive
I mean,
3 times.
we
as
cut
much as
everywhere.
it's
I agree.
50,000.
Yeah.
As you guys are thinking about the next section, we do talk about minimum park improvements, 10 acres per thousand. I think we talk about, no, we don't talk about at least 40% being improved. That is just kind of going to be a general overarching goal of ours to try and do with each of these. Some developments will obviously have more natural than improved than others, but each park and each trailhead, we're asking for a parking lot and a bathroom, and then in the park, a playground. And how many spaces go in that parking lot? It's all based on a per acre calculation. What I did, is I just looked at Ogden City. I took I took the 7 of their different parks. I measured how many acres is in the park, how big is the playground equipment, how big is the playground area, how big is the pavilion and bathrooms, and I just took an average across there and said, okay, our park's going to be built that way, and it's a per acre. I broke it down to a per acre unit. So for every acre of park they put in, there's a certain amount of extra they got. So if it's per acre, 325 square feet per acre of covered pavilion. If they have a 5 acre park, they're putting in a 12 or so 100 square foot pavilion, and the bathroom can be part of that. So as the park grows, those facilities grow. Or they put in 5 different 325 square foot pavilions. So give them the flexibility on how they execute it. Give the park district flexibility, because we're saying do this, but what we're also saying under project specific detail is none of this can apply. We can say all this is omitted and we're doing something unique for this project. We're going to try not to do that as much as we can, try and stick to this, but sometimes we'll see good opportunities where we'll want to do something different. Okay.
Are we going to go over more of this in another work session then, Charlie?
Is that what you want to read us?
Yes. Yeah. All right, read it so you're not too surprised. The only other thing that I think I'm a little concerned about is trail crossings, trail street crossings. So take a look at that. I looked at NACTO standards. What I'm hoping you guys are comfortable with, and I'll bring some examples of what that looks like next time, is where a 10-foot wide pathway crosses a street, a major residential and above, so not minor, but major residential and above. It's called a speed ramp, essentially. Inclines, there's a certain amount of incline that you can't go above. It's got to be able to get over. A fire truck and a plow has to be able to easily go over it. So incline up about 6 inches, have the trail run across the road and come back down again. So that would be on the residential streets. When it comes to the collector and arterial streets, it would be curb extension bulb outs. Are you guys familiar with what those are? Mm-hmm. Where the curb comes out a little bit, constrains the road just a little bit. Somebody can walk out essentially where the park cars would otherwise be, because they've got a safe place to be. And once they're standing there, you know they're want to cross the road. There's a crosswalk Maybe there's not a speed table there. It's going to be up to the county engineer and UDOT on that, and I know UDOT's not going to want speed tables. But at the very least, give them that spot to stand so that people know they're about to cross the road. The other thing I have is if it's just that, if there's no speed table, put in a rapid flashing beacon like you have here downtown on the collector and arterial streets, not in the middle of the neighborhoods. So that's the only other thing I'm a little concerned about being maybe too much or maybe not accepted. But if you look at some of the best communities, including Norton Commons, you'll find
How big a subdivision are you talking about?
for these.
Yeah.
Any subdivision that this fits. And so it could be 10 acres to 100 acres. If the developer doesn't have a creative imagination and doesn't have a master plan that they are wanting to do, they take this and they say, well, okay, I can design to this. So,
Charlie, thanks. You're doing the lion's share of all of this, and you've crafted a really good agreement. You really have.
thank you, and you're welcome. And also, I am uniquely aware of the policy challenges, the nitpicking issues, because I mean, it was that way from the very first development agreement that we did after the general plan was adopted. It was, why are we requiring all this stuff? Because the general plan says do something cool. How do we do that? Well, we can hope that a developer volunteers that kind of stuff, or we can require it, and maybe we're requiring too much. So you guys tell me where that balance is. Ultimately, the county commission will tell us where that balance is.
We adjourn?
Yep.
Recording stopped.
Is that a slam dunk?
Yep.